Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining. Oops. This is going to be the second attempt for the special class, an update on current events. Oops. It's a Monday night I began, and then we had this big blackout that knocked us offline, and we came to a crashing end, which comes with Latova is also for the good, because I don't think I developed the ideas so well yet. It was just beginning, and it was just in the beginning of the germination. So now I think the ideas are a little more crystallized in my head. Last night we had an earthquake here in LA. So let's hope we get through the class safely tonight. Just 1 second. I need to wipe off the spill over here. And I don't want to review what we spoke about. It's going to be, first of all, it's going to be a fascinating class. I don't say that in every class. I'm very excited about these ideas. It's going to be a really interesting class. Add a lot of insight into the madness of what's going on. But I am asking that you don't listen to this class until you listen to the part one, which we gave a few days ago. Same title, part one. Over there, we laid the foundations of the ideas. And then when I got smack in the middle of everything, we had this blackout, and the electric got knocked out. The power got knocked out. And we were in the dark for a minute. It got knocked out twice. Okay, so the theme of this discussion was, is there something cosmic and of grandeur in the elimination of a bunch of evil people recently? By the order of their elimination, the president of Iran was taken out in May by God Almighty himself as his plane crashed. Not his plane, his helicopter crashed into a mountain somewhere in Iran, not far from Kazakhstan. I forgot already which place it was. On the way back from a ceremony of a inauguration of a dam. So that was, and again, unless it's possible that the Mossad was involved in tinkering with that helicopter, with the Mossad, you never know. But at least on the outside, Iran didn't even blame Israel on that. So if it was very hidden. And even if the Israelis did it and the Mossad did it, it's still an act of God. But at least in this case, it was very open that it was an act of God, in the sense that it doesn't seem like there's not, other than guessing that it was the Mossad, we really don't know. However, and then a whole lot of bad guys were eliminated in Gaza, but one of them that was particularly noticeable was Mohammed Diefs. And he was just eliminated. He was the head of the Hamas military wing in Gaza, him and Sinwar. This guy was a really wicked, evil fellow, and he was taken out. And then within a week, after Hezbollah attacked and bombed and hit a soccer field in Israel, killing 12 Druze children, there was a retaliation by Israel in Beirut, in Lebanon, that took out an important fellow by the name of, his last name is Shukar. I forgot the first name. Fahud, I think. Fahud Shukar. And this was a big blow to Hezbollah. He was the second in command after Nasrallah. And for that, the Israelis did, for those two, Israel took credit for. Netanyahu spoke about it just last week. How anybody that messes with Israel's got to watch their backs, because they're coming after them. So Diefs was taken out in Gaza. And then, what's his name? Shukar was taken out in Beirut. The Israelis also hit the Houthis very strongly, which we know is one of the nations that used to live in the ancient land of Canaan. At least they carry their name of Houthim. They were hitting Yemen, but I'm not going to speak about them and the significance of that because we're not dealing with a particular person over there, just a people. I'm sure there's a leader, but he wasn't necessarily part of this elimination. And then, in addition to that, finally, the big fish that was taken out was Ismail Haniya, and he was who was hiding out in Qatar, and he had left Qatar and went for the inaugural events of the new president in Iran, since Raisi was eliminated a few months ago. And during the ceremony, right after at night, he was taken out by a bomb. That, again, it seems like by a bomb that was planted under his bed, that exploded. And even though Israel did not take credit openly, everybody knows it was the work of the Mossad. And that's what's causing all this turmoil. Will Iran, God forbid, attack Israel? What's going on? A lot of people in Israel are very tense, and people across the world are tense. What's going on? Expecting, God forbid, retaliation both from Iran and Hezbollah for the elimination of their leaders, and God will protect. Okay, so we discussed this is just what the subject is. And as I mentioned to you in last class, I'd like to discuss perhaps, because on the simple earthy level, other than shaking up the enemy and telling the enemy that, listen here, if you mess with us, you're going to be killed, and you're going to, by them paying a heavy price for it, it might it might serve as deterrence. Other than that, you don't accomplish much, because these terrorists come a dime a dozen. As one goes, there's another one to take his place. There are millions and millions of children whose minds are poisoned from a very young age with one dream that is given to them already from their mother's milk, and that is to destroy the Jews in Israel and to kick the Jews out of Israel and create the great Islamic Caliphate. That is a dream, and for that there have people who are even willing to die. That's where the animosity and the hatred is. So you take one out, another one comes in its place. You take another one out, another comes into place. Obviously, it slows down a little the operation when the person who's in charge and has got all the connections and he has all the systems understood. So you definitely weaken the enemy, but it does not really take care of the problem in a lasting manner, other than the two things of deterrence, and it messes up a little bit the chain of command. However, what I would like to do, and what we're doing in this class, is to explain that this is a spiritual elimination. That these physical creatures, they are embodiments of powerful spiritual entities that were blocking the coming of Mashiach. And their elimination paves the way for the coming of Mashiach. And as I told you last week, I would like to discuss it based, not last week, in the last class, we're going to try to explain it based on the names of these people. By looking into their names, we're going to get an understanding of their spiritual quality, of their, we might say, satanic energies, what the force is. We can identify it, because the forces of darkness are complex, just like the forces, lahavdal, the forces of holiness, are very complex. We know God created a certain balance where the evil is in the same structure as the good, and when the evil is so by the name. Look in the name. So I'd like to look at the names of the people. I'd like to look at the dates, some of the dates, some of the names, not all names, the places where they were taken out. And what I'm basically implying over here is that the entire apparatus and the chain of command of the klipa, of the unholy in the world, was eliminated. And therefore, it's a huge, huge, huge breakthrough. But instead of just speaking about it in terms of in a detached way, I'd like to address it from a very personal experience. What I mean personal, I don't mean me myself, I mean of us as humanity. In other words, the ideas that we're trying to explain over here is how this makes a difference in our own personal lives, because these wars are being fought on a global scale, but they're also fought in each and every one of our hearts. So the idea we were talking about in the last class was that Israel, the war of Hamas, the war of the Palestinians, is really at the root of it all. It's an anti-Moshiach campaign. In other words, as Mashiach is supposed to come, in order to stop the redemption from coming, there is a war. And for Mashiach to come, and the result of Mashiach's coming is the gathering of the exiles and the Jewish people, reinstating the Jewish people to their homeland, to their God-given homeland. Israel will belong to the Jews and can only belong to the Jews because God gave it as an eternal gift to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for their children forever and ever and ever and ever, and no one will ever get in the way. Now, the Arabs come and are trying to stop that. The forces, radical Islam, is trying to stop that. All of this has been predicted a long time ago in the Zohar, in the Talmud, in verses, that the forces of Yishmael, who's the other son of Abraham, are going to try to derail the entire return of the Jewish people in Messianic times. The return of the Jewish people in Messianic times, to a very great degree, happened already. Jews have rebuilt the land of Israel. However, there are all these forces, and especially now it's Yishmael backed by the entire world. It smacks on the prophecies of Gog and Magog and the like, which are wars against the Mashiach, and so on and so forth. That's really what's going on. There is no question that this is a battle against that. Now, for more of that, listen to the first class. Now, the idea that Israel belongs to the Jewish people is not a nice, a wonderful thing. Well, other nations, other peoples have lands. The Jewish people have been wandering. The Jewish people have not been welcomed in many countries throughout all of history. They suffered enormous persecution and anti-Semitism. It's only right for the Jews also to have a place to put their head down and live in this planet, live on this world, and say, okay, so then, why not Israel if that's all? The argument could be made. Okay, I just saw on YouTube there was this woman, very articulate and very, very, very. She was making this argument. She claims she's atheist, but she was kind of like arguing the Zionist argument of back then. Jews need a place to live, and why? And okay, so the land of Israel, we've lived there a long time ago. Let it be now, but mainly because that was her argument. Whatever the argument, the value of it doesn't carry too much weight. I mean, the fact that Jews should have a place, why not? I mean, if everybody has a place. But the idea, what I'm saying over here, is that it's much, 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 much more than that. It is at the very core of the reason the entire world exists. The reason the entire world exists is because God wanted to have a home in this world. And God's home in this world is in Jerusalem. That's the seat. That's the capital. That's the seat of God puts his holy throne. That's where he dwells in this world. He created the world for him not to have his throne in heaven, but to have his throne down here below in his palace, which is the holy temple in Jerusalem. For that, his people are the ones who are the residents, his close people. The Jewish people are the people he chose at Sinai. They must inhabit the land of Israel. And for that, and the Torah tells us again and again and again and again that when you take the land of Israel, make sure that you take the entire land and you drive out the inhabitants that are living there, which means that the Arabs are even though the modern state of Israel gives legitimate, allows full Arabs to live and gives them full rights, as long as they're not making trouble. If they would all behave really well and be comfortable with it, they would be equal citizens, have what's it called again, the rights, voting rights, and having rights to all the various different assistances that the government gives, and programs, and the education system, or whatever else that the government would give. the land of Israel, they would have rights to. That's the modern land. According to the Torah, when the Jews came in with Joshua, the Torah says it's not a good idea for the Gentiles to live in the land of Israel, the ancient people, the Canaanites, the pagans that were living there. You must drive them out. If you do not drive them out, they're going to cause you trouble. And that's the bottom line. Whether we like it or not, there will never, ever, 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 ever be a two-state solution. If God forbid does come about through some idiotic either president of the United States or other pressure from various different countries that put the pressure on Israel, and a weak Israeli government that accepts something like that, it's going to bring about a calamity like we have never seen before, both to Jews and to non-Jews as well. So it's not a good idea. I can't say it's not going to happen. We pray to God it's not going to happen, but it's not going to last. That's the point. It cannot be. It's not meant to be. So a land, two states for sure not. But even having the Arabs living there as they live now doesn't work. And God keeps on saying that in the Torah. Last week in the Torah portion, Matis Maseh, God warns the Jewish people, if you will let them live amongst you, they will end up being thorns in your eyes. They will make your life miserable. In other words, you are calling upon yourself antifadas. That's just what's going to happen. You're gonna get, God forbid, stabbed. You're gonna get shot at. You're gonna get your buses pelted with stones. If you make a wrong turn by mistake and you end up in their town, you might, God forbid, get lynched. That's the reality. And therefore, as hard as it is, and as much as maybe it goes against your soft heart, you must clean out the land and establish it as a Jewish land. Now, I am not saying this should be Israeli policy today, because this is what, when Mashiach is going to come and God is going to be revealed in the world, Mashiach is not even going to have to drive the Palestinians out of the land of Israel. The Palestinians will happily and with it from their own volition pick themselves up and leave. They will know they don't belong. And I'm sure Mashiach will make sure they have somewhere nice to live. There's a whole lot of empty Arab land for countries and countries, and they can settle over there. They do not belong in the land of Israel. Why is that? Why is that? Because the land of Israel is a holy land, and it needs the holy people, the Jewish people, to live in that land. Jewish people have a special ability to make the argument that the Jewish people are special is unnecessary, because everybody knows the Jewish people are special. And you know they're special because if you do if you look at the news, I don't know, it's everything is always about the Jews. What's going on? It's not stopping, and we're such a tiny minority. In other words, the Jews would wish we would leave us alone, but for whatever reason, we keep on making it to the headlines again and again and again and again and again. It's like, it doesn't stop. The Jewish people are either the world will see the Jewish people as the ultimate blessing, or they will see the Jewish people as a terrible toothache. But just like a toothache you can't ignore, the world cannot ignore its Jews. And why they can't ignore its Jews? Because Jews are at the center of existence. Why? Because Jews are the facilitators of God into this world. That's it. There's no other explanation for anti-Semitism. It's that, and it's only that. There's nothing else that explains all this Jew hatred. It's because the Jew is the funnel for God. Whether the Jew is observant or not observant, he's still a funnel for God into this world. If he or she are observant, then they are funneling God into this world in a far more positive, holy, and productive, good way. Okay? And they're obviously increasing that influence a billionfold as we keep the mitzvahs. Okay. And for that reason, when God is going to live in the Holy Temple, he's going to be surrounded by the Jewish people who are going to be living as his people, as his neighbors, as his subjects. And then the rest of humanity is going to be uplifted through the Jewish people. That does not mean that Israel is going to be off limit to the nations. Quite on the contrary, all the prophets say that the nations are going to come to serve God in the Holy Temple. Okay? Now, the war that's going on right now is a last attempt to prevent that from happening. And for that reason, there is such a force to cry and to say that we have to give the Palestinians a state. And you understand something. The state the Palestinians want, even if we're going to accept that they don't mean it when they say from the river to the sea. They only want a portion. They want to live side by side in loving harmony with their cousins, the Jews. And we're really cousins, right? We really are cousins because we come from Isaac and they come from Ishmael. So we're really two brothers. So the Jewish people are cousins to the Arabs. And you'd say the Arabs want to live in brotherly love. They just want their piece of land. Okay, let's believe that. But obviously we know it's not true because then they wouldn't be chanting from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea means we don't want Jews to be in the land of Israel at all. We want the entire territory. Okay? Now, but even let's say if we give it to them and we say, what do you want? They want to split Jerusalem. Now, the part that they want is the East Jerusalem. The part that they don't mind giving to the Israelis, or at least temporarily, in order to get a state, that they get a footage and they'll make a terror state. But even if you say that they want to have it, is they want East Jerusalem. West Jerusalem is the new city. East, the modern city. East Jerusalem is where all the ancient sites are. And East Jerusalem contains the Temple Mount and the site from our holy temple, which they have their mosque on it called Al-Aqsa, and that's also in which they speak about all the time of Quds meaning Jerusalem. So, being that that's the case, that's this war. This is nothing else than a war to stop the final battle of good and evil. So this is what it is. It's a preventive. It's trying to stop the manifestation of God, the Jewish people in the land. We're almost there, and they're fighting. They're fighting to hold on. That's what it is, to hold off the redemption. Now, let's understand the deeper significance of this. As we started speaking in last class, the Jewish body, that all of this, the land of Israel, in addition to it being the physical location, is also a story of each and every one, and a battle that takes place in each and every one of the land, in each and every one of our life. Okay? The land of Israel, as it applies at least to the Jewish people, are our bodies, our physical bodies. Our physical bodies are called land, as we discussed in the last class. Our physical bodies needs to be Jewish territory. Jewish territory really means, that we discussed in last class, Jew means somebody who is it comes from the word Judah. Judah means from the word Yehuda in Hebrew. Yehuda means from the word Hoda'ah, which means to submit. That means that Jewish means submission to God. That's basically what Jewish means. So a Jewish body means a body that is in submission to God, a body that lives and is devoted and dedicated to God's will. Obviously does not violate God's commandments. God commanded the Jewish people not just 7 commandments he gave to the greater humanity, to all the children of Noah. But to the Jewish people, God gave 613 commandments, which really turns into, if you take in all the rabbinical ordinances, turns into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of details and sub-details of how to live the life as a Jew. Every single little aspect of one's life, there is the Torah, the code of Jewish law, has something to say about it. You have to consult and do it the Jewish way, the godly way, the way God wants it. Sometimes it's comfortable, it's enjoyable, it's wonderful. We love doing it. Sometimes it's an annoyance. But if you're Jewish and you're living your Jewishness, everybody, if you're Jewish, you have a Jewish mother, you're Jewish. Question is, are you expressing your Jewishness in your life? So to express the Jewishness into our physical life means that every single thing we do, every mitzvah, every commandment, and every law is observed. Observed, which means we do it the godly way, the way God wants us to do it. And we do not do what God doesn't want to do. Okay? That's obviously it. But now it goes deeper than that. Not only do we do what God wants to do, but then there is a whole, it's very important. There's a whole area in our life that we might say is not forbidden. It's also not a mitzvah. It's not a commandment. It's kind of the mundane aspects of life. Not holy, but not anti-holy. It's not against God's will. It's the permissible. In the realm of, let's take day-to-day life, forbidden are certain elements in our diet that God doesn't approve of. Last time, maybe that's the reason we got a blackout, because maybe I spoke a little too. I said that I spoke a little sharp. Not sharp. I was just trying to be funny. I was saying that God is allergic. He has a lot of allergies. So I hope I didn't offend God. Right? Hashem, forgive me. I meant to say that I was just trying to say, just like when a person has an allergy, you get you can't eat certain foods and you don't eat it. So if we're sensitive to God and God says certain foods I just don't like, so that's not kosher. And then there are certain things that are a mitzvah to eat, like Shabbos. It's a mitzvah to have 3 meals, and then an extra meal when the Shabbos goes out. Matzah Shabbos, the end of Shabbos, there is a mitzvah to have the holiday meals, to eat a matzah on Passover, and the various different mitzvot we do with food. And that's another extreme that's clearly holy and godly. And then there is the forbidden, which is impure and profane. But then there is what's not profane, but it's not holy and godly. That's the middle area. So that too needs to be done with a godly consciousness. And the code of Jewish law requires that as well. In other words, that in truth there's no really mundane aspects of life. Life needs to be thoroughly sacred and holy. Life itself is holy. Life is sacred. Why? Because God is life. And if God is life, then life is sacred. Because God is sacred. So it's not okay just to have moments of sacredness, moments of holiness. In other words, the way we generally experience our lives are as follows. Our life, as we see it most of the time, is essentially a mundane life. I'm living life, and what's life? It's my life. My life. I go about my day. I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I make money, go out and have a business, I have a job, I have a business, or whatever it is that you do, you make a living. I exercise, take care of my health. I have my life. I have to pay my godly dues. Whatever God wants, pieces of my life, I tithe. So I take a percentage of my money and make that sacred. I take a percentage of my time and I do volunteer work, as you say. I do holy work, or I at least do what God demands of me. A certain part of the day we have to study Torah. So I have to give of my time, I have to give of my resources, and I have to give of all the other things. But the general sense is it's my life, and then I'm giving parts of it to God because God is nice to me. He gave me life, and God has been giving me all the blessings. It's only nice that we give him back. We serve him and give him some pieces of our life. You see, that, as we're going to see, is not, even though you can get away living that way, in the time of exile, yes, until Mashiach comes, it's not the optimal way to live, but most people do live that way. And yet, it passes. You passed your test because you ultimately, as long as you're not sinning and you fulfill your obligations, the fact that there is a nice chunk of life that is not sacred and holy works in the non-godly state that we're in. But when Mashiach will come, and even today's days, if we are living the way we early should be living, on the truth, on a much deeper level, since God is life and God is reality, God should be present and visible in every aspect of our day, in every aspect of our experience. There shouldn't be one tiny iota in life, one little crevice in life that we're not mindful or that's not expressive of the divine. If God is not there, we should not be there. And what does it mean God is not there? If it's not in fulfillment of God's interests, if it's not furthering his wish and his desire, it ought not to be. And that's when we are living that way, then our entire existence is Jewish. And then our body is inhabited by Jewish people, meaning our body is Jewish. Our land of Israel, which is our body, is then a holy Jewish land, which means it's a godly land. When we divide our physical life, when we create sections in our material physical life, in which part of our life is holy, sacred, and in fulfillment of God's will, and parts and pieces of our life is mundane, and or as we said earlier, we experience life itself as mundane. And then we introduce into life holiness, godliness, and sacredness. Then our land is still the land of Israel, because the body is God's desire, just like the land of Israel doesn't change. If Palestinians are living on it, it's still the land of Israel. If the Turks are living in the land of Israel, then it's still the land of Israel. If the Crusaders came up from Germany and Britain and France, and they inhabited parts of the land of Israel, they weren't Jews. It's still the land of Israel, inhabited by others, whoever the other people that came around, the Romans or whatever, or the Greeks in the time of the first temple. The time of the second temple. It doesn't change. It's still the land of Israel. Our body is always God's desired land. This is God's property. He says, this is my body. This is my space. The Jewish body is my space. I am meant to be there. I am meant to be the expressed. This is my home. However, that is only actualized and revealed and when everything in our life is reflecting God's will, and when our life itself is sacred. So just like in the time of exile, let's do now a parallel. Just like in the physical land of Israel, there is going to be a time in the days of Mashiach when Israel will only be inhabited by Jews. And there were times in the past when Israel was mostly inhabited by Jews. We said earlier, God keeps on warning the Jewish people, get rid of the other inhabitants. They never do so, and they suffer. They never did it complete. Even King David did not do it in his days. Even King Solomon, it wasn't complete. It was never fully happened. It's only going to be in the days of Mashiach that the land of Israel is going to be fully Jewish. So, but in the rest of the time, although the land of Israel belongs to the Jews, it's not fully Jewish. So the same is on our psychological topography. What is it called? Topography? The layout of our body, the map on our body is that it's not only Jewish things happening in our body. Again, let's define Jew. Jew means expressive of God. That means Jew. Because Jew comes from the word Yehuda. Yehuda means submission to God. So the Jewishness of our body is dependent if mitzvos and holiness is always happening in the body. So eating I don't know, anything. Eating a chicken sandwich or I don't know, whatever you want to eat, a salmon burger, The 9 days we're eating fish, so we're coming up with all kinds of different cool things to eat. Eating a salmon burger or whatever it is, a tuna sandwich, whatever it is you're doing. If it's not filled with godly content, what does that mean? How do you fill your consumption of a breakfast or a lunch of eggs, of scrambled eggs in the morning, of an omelet? How do you make it godly? It's very simple. If you know, if you're eating in with a consciousness that it's God's food, and this is fuel, because without this fuel, the body can't function to do a mitzvah, to fulfill God's will. So the food needs to be eaten so that we can have fuel to serve God. Then it's holy. Then it's for God's interest. If we forget that, and the food is being eaten just because it's yummy and it tastes good and it makes us happy and it makes us feel good, but there's no divine consciousness, it's not forbidden. It's not a sin. It's mundane. If it's mundane, means it's non-godly. If it's non-godly, means it's non-Jewish. That's the bottom line. And in our lives, until Mashiach comes, our life is compartmentalized. It's not fully Jewish. As we come closer to Mashiach, when Mashiach is going to come, we're all going to experience deep godly consciousness. And then everything in our bodies will become holy and godly. Now, for one moment, it seems like it's beyond our pay grade. To live to be conscious of God 24/7 is something that the holiest rabbis, saintly, great tzaddikim used to live in. Or, it's very hard to find someone who lives like that even today. So today's days, in the times of past, you had these big saintly tzaddikim and great people. It seems almost impossible. And it almost seems like something that you might feel like, I don't even want to. Like, what's left for me? Why not? Like, what's the justification of that? That seems to be so, like, why can't I have just space for myself? That's me. Why do I have to introduce God into everything? Everything. It seems to be a very high and a very you call it, super ambitious, super very lofty. So, but if you think about it, and this is very important to understand this whole business that we spoke about, the elimination of these terrorists, this is all going to come together in such an amazing way. So, but you got to bear with me. We're going to go through some very fundamental ideas until we get there. So, it's really simple. It's simple because God is the reality of life, and our very consciousness, the way we experience existence, ourself, and everything, is simply a lie and a distortion. But we've bought so deeply into this lie that the lie became our reality. We're basically looking at things upside down. We're not seeing things the way they are. And for that reason, we're comfortable and we even enjoy this convoluted or misguided life, because we're simply blinded, because there's why. Let's explain why. It's very simple. Since for everything that exists, our material, including our material body, our physical body, and every material item we have in our home that's ours, we say, right? My food, my coffee maker, my computer, my phone, my bed, my pajamas, my life, right? Everything that I have, my wardrobe, my car, my money, my bank accounts, my retirement accounts, my, all the my's that we have, everything that we own. To what degree do we own it? What do you mean you own it? You're producing it? Why does it exist? Why is it even here? It exists because someone is wishing it into existence. It's being moved from non-existence to existence every second. Every second your fingers are being brought into existence. Your fingers? My fingers? It's none of ours. God, with his infinite wisdom and infinite desire and infinite compassion and kindness, is wishing us into existence and bringing us into existence continuously. He's the reality of our life. So shouldn't everything be in accordance to his wish? Shouldn't everything be expressive of the true being who's being it into existence? Just that this becomes understandable to us. Just take for a moment, imagine if you in your mind created invented a creature. This is a mashal, a metaphor that I've given when I taught Tanya here many years ago. So some of you have been listening to the classes maybe for a really long time might remember this mashal. So imagine if you concocted in your own head a new creature, okay? You're going to sell it to Disney. Disney's going to be able to make a movie out of it. But this is your produced, an entity that never existed. I remember from years ago, I said, you're the founder, you're the one who made up, you produced Winnie the Pooh. Okay, and at this point, you didn't share it with anybody, didn't illustrate it yet on a book. It exists only in your head, Winnie the Pooh or Bugs Bunny or whatever, some kind of caricature. So you create this entity and you're creating the story. So you have this image floating in your brain. Now, one thing is for sure, if you're the creation who creates Winnie the Pooh or creates Bugs Bunny in your head, so Bugs Bunny or Winnie the Pooh that's existing in your head is being continuously controlled and expressive of your wish. Whatever you want Bugs Bunny to say, it will say. Whatever you want Bugs Bunny not to say, it won't say. You will move it, and you want him to run up the hill, he'll run up the hill. You want him to run down the hill, he'll run down there. You want him to jump into the pool, he'll jump into the pool. You don't want him to jump into the pool, he'll go around the pool. Because there's nothing else there to move Bugs Bunny or Winnie the Pooh anywhere other than your mind. So if we are all the myriads of all different types of Bugs Bunnies and Winnie the Poohs of God's mind, that he's thinking us and making us into existence, where do we get the nerve to suddenly think that we exist on our own and that my life is my life and my stuff is my stuff? Where does it even come to us? It doesn't make any sense at all. So we're really living this way. The way we live is really an illness. It's really a sickness. It's a virus that has kind of like somehow gotten in and blocked God from his creations. And therefore creates the sense of independence and separation. And we feel that we're doing God a big favor if we're giving him 10% from our earnings. And what's with all the other 90%? That's mine. What do you mean it's yours? What is ours? Nothing is mine. So everything in our lives ought to be expressive of Hashem. That's the way it ought to be. And that's the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes, because the virus will be gone. The concealment will be gone. It won't make us miserable. Actually, we will be a billion times happier. We're miserable because we're chasing on serving an ego that doesn't really exist. That's why you can't make him happy. You think that, okay, the next time I go to the restaurant and I'll go to a fine place and I'll enjoy myself and I'll have a good time and I'll like people run around from city to city trying out every restaurant and like they're running after happiness, and eventually they're like, come on, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're happy for 2 minutes, you enjoy yourself, and it's over. It doesn't give any deep satisfaction. Why? Because you're serving a fraudulent company that doesn't exist. And deep inside, you know it's fraudulent. That's the thing. So we're uncomfortable. At least subconsciously, we're uncomfortable. That's the story. So when this virus will go away and we'll all be in touch with our true identity, with our true reality of who we really are, we're going to be living healthy, godly lives. Everything is going to be godly. Everything is going to be holy. And our physical body is going to be inhabited only by Jews, which means every action, thought, speech, and action is going to be Jewish. It's going to be expressive of God. And from the Jewish experience, it's going to spill over to the Gentile world as well. Because when the consciousness comes into the Jewish people, eventually through the Jewish people, it will move into the rest of humanity as well. And that's the deeper meaning when we say that Israel will expand across the entire world. To a certain degree, the rest of the world will also be Jewish, not halachically Jewish, but mentally Jewish, which means mentally in tune with God, with truth. And everybody will be mindful of God all the time. Again, it's not going to happen overnight through the entire world. I don't know how exactly, but it's going to move. It's going to increase. The consciousness is going to spread throughout the entire world. Based on this concept. So now for one moment, let's understand. So if this is just a simple truth, so what's the reason why we struggle so much? Why is it that it's so hard to really live our life? Even just listening to the laws, it's not easy. We struggle. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we do things we ought not to do. Then we feel miserable, but we do it, and then we do it again. And we don't learn our lesson, and we do it again. We sin. We do it. Why is that? If it's so obvious that God, the answer is there is something called klipa. Klipa, spoke about the virus. Klipa is a shell that God created that covers and hides the fact that we are all his Winnie the Poohs and his Bugs Bunnies, that he's thinking us into existence. There is God. Okay, God intentionally. It wouldn't be interesting to God if we would experience ourselves as in his mind, as his caricatures, and therefore be completely subservient to his will, because God would not be entertained at all. Because then he would be controlling everything all the time, and it wouldn't be meaningful to him. Everything would be just predetermined. And everybody would be holy and everybody would be godly. It would be completely blah. So the cool thing that God does is that he blocks Winnie the Pooh and Bugs Bunny, whoever else he created, and he blocks them, and he makes these caricatures that he's thinking them into existence, which he can stop thinking them in a second, and they would cease to exist as if they never existed. That's how much God would undo us if he should want to undo us. He would undo us and delete us even from the past, because God can rewind even history and undo history that was, and it will truly be that it never was. That's so super cool. He can go in reverse and undo it, not only for now and onward, but even in the past. He's not going to do it, because he really wants this project to see it through to the end. But because he could do it, right? So we should be so dependent on him, yet we're not. Why are we not? Because he chose to block us. And to imagine creating a caricature that you create and you sustain, but you create it in a way that it has a mind of its own. And when you want it to go right, it goes left. It doesn't have to listen to you. It does its own thing. Now, ultimately, the very fact, okay, then you get into a question, does God really not control us, or are they not working with the plan? But we know we have free choice, and the free choice is that we move around based on what we choose, and not in subservience to God. That's that, and that means living the ungodly. We can choose the ungodly life. Oh, that's a good author and a good producer and a good. It produces a creature that they lose control over it, and it kind of creates its own story. That's what someone's told me is like the real cool thing about the ability in filmmaking. You create a creature, and then the creature takes over, and you lose control over the creature. It goes off on its own. and you have to just follow it to wherever it will go. So in some way, this is our situation. So God does, but ultimately he wants us to come around back to the ultimate truth, to live in synchronization with who we really are. The journey is important. The journey away from him and into our imaginary existence is important, so that when we come back to the truth, we come back with deep and true appreciation, with real love and with real happiness, and we really appreciate it, and we bond with him for all of eternity. So the process of going away, going independent is painful, and it has a lot of slips and falls. It's worth it, because eventually when we come back together again and we realize our truth, when the darkness and the virus dissipates and we suddenly become sober again, now we're intoxicated, we're in a drunken state, when the alcohol will wear off and we will begin to see things the way they really are, we will really, really, really be joyful to be in that healthy, true, real reality, real state of existence. So this distorted state is called klipa. It's called the shell. Or let's give it an ancient word. It's called Satan. It's called Satan. It's called darkness. It's called forces of evil. It's all part of this distortion, part of this force. Now, so it's interesting. Is our entire being disconnected? Are we, until Mashiach comes, doomed to be in the disconnected, egocentric, misguided, misaligned consciousness? Is that a kind of a decree or a condition that we're trapped in and we can't free ourselves from it? And the answer is no. The reason for that is because there's a part of us that is not blocked. There's a part of us that's completely connected, and that's our divine soul. So we all inhabit two souls. We have a body, which the body is the territory, the desirable territory. That's where God wants to live, in our physical lives. God is not satisfied when our souls are holy. That's why Christianity absolutely doesn't work. It doesn't make it to first base, because God is not interested in you being holy in heaven. God and faith itself is your heaven inside of you. God wants day-to-day behavior, which what does that mean? Because God wants to reside in the physical. Because the physical is the most challenging place. Physical is the place where naturally God is the most ignored. Physicality is an obstruction. It's very hard to feel God until Mashiach comes in the material physical world. When Mashiach comes, because as a result of all the Torah and all the mitzvot that we've done, the physical world will be rewired. And the natural feeling of the physical world will be its godly light, its godly content. But until Mashiach comes, the physical is very dense and thick. And precisely because of that, it's so hard to feel and express God in the physical. And it's precisely because of that that God wants it. God wants to live in the physical. He wants us to stare him into the physical, to live a godly life in the physical. For that he selected the Jewish people, to bring him into the mundane, what was till now the mundane physical world. We should fill the mundanity of the world with God's presence and reveal its inherent sacredness and holiness in everything mundane that we do, including our eating, our dressing, our business world, our world of intimacy, and the like. Every element, every avenue of life ought to be filled with godly content. Bringing God into the material physical world is the objective of everything. Okay? So we have a soul. The soul is holy. It's godly. But we also have another soul. And that's a secret we learn when we learn in Tanya. Okay, we have two souls. We have one soul that comes directly from the divine, and she is divine, and therefore she's not part of the darkness. She knows the truth. If we wouldn't have another soul, and this soul itself would be the conductor of the body, in other words, if the soul would be sitting down by the steering wheel, if our godly soul would be given the keys to our car, let's look at the body as the car, the vehicle, and the soul would be given the keys and it would be at the driver's seat, then we would always stay in the lane. We would always be following the GPS, the divine GPS. We would never make mistakes. We wouldn't go off. We wouldn't go here. We wouldn't be distracted. We would always be following. Our life would be from A to Z, 24/7, doing only godly things. Both mitzvahs, we would never do sins, never be in a violation. We would never be speeding over the speed limit. We'd never go over a red light. We'd never miss a stop sign. We would never, right? No, we never park in the place we shouldn't be parking. We would be perfect, good citizens. But not only that, even in our material lives, everything would be with divine purpose, because our godly soul knows God and cannot forget about God. So it's conscious of God all the time, and it lives to it. God is the only reality. So everything must be godly, or else it wouldn't be interested in doing it. That's our godly soul. So why doesn't our vehicle do that? The answer is there are two drivers in the front seat of the car, two people. We have another soul. The other soul comes from the dark side, comes from the klipa, comes from the unholy side, comes from the satanic forces. It comes from that which blocks God. Okay? And there are these two souls, watch this, sitting in the front seat, each one trying to grab the steering wheel. So it's almost like, the godly soul sits on the right side of the car, where in England, that's right, that's the side passenger. The right side is where the steering wheel is. And the animal soul, the unholy soul, the dark soul sits on the left side of the car. And imagine a steering wheel there's only one steering wheel, but it can move to the right side or the left side. And there's a tug of war going on between these two souls. And that's what's going on. And that's the reason why it's so hard to live a godly, holy life, is because we have two voices inside of us. And the one that's closer and more available to us, the one that's naturally louder, the one that has a louder voice, a booming voice from when we're born, is our unholy soul. It's the loud one. It's the aggressive one. It's the one who's more, right? And therefore, he's got bigger muscles, and he's got a hold, and he's driving. The godly soul is persuasive. It speaks reason. It tries to talk the other soul into it, allow it to try. And sometimes it tries to grab the steering wheel, or other times it tries to tell the animal soul where to steer. And sometimes the animal soul listens to it. But in order for us to hear our godly soul speaks in a whisper. It's a small little voice, quiet voice, because it's more sublime, it's farther, it's more of a heavenly being. So it's not so brute, it's not so much on earth. So it tries to constantly, it's the one power that it has really, really strong and really, really, really powerful is the guilt. As after we made a wrong turn and we smashed the car and we got into trouble, the godly soul is very good at telling us, I told you, I told you so. And if you would have listened to me, you would have not done that. And then we feel miserably guilty. See, that the godly soul is very good at. And we all know how much we feel our guilt. If you're Jewish, for sure, you know what I'm talking about. It happens all the time. And then you wonder, like, okay, why couldn't you speak up before I messed up? Why'd you have what guilt now? And I know you were saying it earlier. You were telling me not to do it. You were telling me or to do what I should be doing or whatever it is. But you're speaking so quietly. At least if you would shout like the animal soul, if you would, then I would hear you. But that's the story. We have two souls that are in conflict, each one driving the car, trying to drive the car. Okay? Now that you get the picture, what's going on? So now, let's now. I think, okay. So let's take this concept and apply it to the physical land of Israel. Okay? The war that's taking place, the satanic side represented by Hamas. Oh, okay. Now that's going to make sense. Okay, here's our first jewel for the day. Excuse me. Let's look at the name Hamas. Hamas comes from the word, it's a Hebrew word. I don't know why they named it Hamas, whatever their reason is. That's not important. What does the name mean? Hamas comes from the word Hamas. Not hummus. Hummus, like eat hummus? No. Hamas. What's Hamas? It says in the story in Genesis, it says Kimala ha'aretz Hamas, that the world became filled with violence. And that's why God wanted the corruption and violence. Hamas means corruption and violence. However, one of the interpretations of the word Hamas means, and this is the way Rashi learns it, the people in the flood, and then the generation of the flood that God destroyed, were very wicked. And they were wicked in many, many different things. Many, many avenues that they were wicked. But it says that their God did not seal their fate to die. The main, what really, really, really tipped the scales and kind of, or the straw that broke the camel's back, that God got God to seal the fate of humanity to die, all humans, was because of theft. Kimala aretz Hamas, Rashi says Hamas means stealing. They lost all sense of other people's property. Nothing. There was none of that. You grabbed whatever you wanted. In other words, people claimed ownership of other people's possession. And then let's take that idea and apply Hamas. Hamas is in today's world, because you have to realize, the forces of unholiness, just like they exist within each and every one of us as an evil inclination, as an animal soul, they also find embodiment in people, in certain forces in the world. The Jewish people are always the embodiment of the divine, of the holy, of the godly. And then there are various different nations, and then there is some really, really big troublemakers. So in different points of history, like Amalek or the various different, these are manifestations of dark evils, of satanic forces. For whatever reason, in the last 50 years, it's the Hamas and various other radical forces that are the embodiment of pure evil. What does Hamas, however, mean? It means theft. What do they want to steal? So on a simple level, they want to steal the Temple Mount and claim that the Temple Mount does not belong to the Jewish people. Or they want to steal the land of Israel away from the Jewish people. It's God's gift to the Jewish people, and they want to steal that land. But on a deeper level, this is so important. It wants to steal the material world, the physical world, away from God. Hamas, in essence, is making a statement. It's saying as follows. Again, not verbally and not even consciously, but through their actions and what they're doing in this world and what they represent is, as we said earlier, preventing the redemption, preventing the temple from being built, which they themselves say that's what their agenda is. Preventing that means preventing God from having his home in Jerusalem, which really means preventing God from manifesting in this world, from being fully realized in this world. So what Hamas is saying is as follows. The material, and this is what Satan has been saying all along. The physical material world is a mind domain. And in other words, a my domain means the ego, the self. It's not God's domain. God, Satan also knows God. God, you can have heaven. In the sublime spiritual worlds over there, it's your space. In the spiritual, everybody serves you. Down here, it's not your space. You can't have your physical world. In other words, they steal the material world away from God. That's the meaning of Hamas. Okay, so now that we have an idea, it's the representation of Hamas. It's preventing God. This is divine real estate. This is God's property, the land of Israel, but really the entire physical world. And it's trying to stop the revelation of God in the material. So it's stealing the physical world away from Hashem. Now, Hamas is an entity from within the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people in general, as we said before, I'm not going to paint all Palestinians as evil. That's not the point over here. But what we could say about all the Palestinian people is they're not Jewish. And if we say that the land of Israel should be inhabited by Jews, which Jews are God's people, and the land of Israel is God's land, and therefore it should be inhabited by God's people, Palestinians living in certain sections, whether it is in the Yehuda and Shomron, which is wrongly called the West Bank, or in Gaza, which is also part of the land of Israel. So when they're in these sections, when the Palestinians want to own that land or take that land, okay, that's part of this. And on the psychological world, that means when the unholy wants to live inside our bodies, steal certain sections of our life. For instance, say it as follows: my eating is for my enjoyment. I'm not interested in God living here. In other words, it's Palestinian territory. When I'm in prayer, when I'm in shul, when I go to synagogue, that's God's territory. That's certain areas that belongs to God. When I study Torah, okay, that's yours, God. Certain parts of my possessions, yours, God. But there's certain areas that are not yours, God. This is my space. That's a Palestinian argument in terms of inside out. That's part of Hamas. It's part of stealing land. It's stealing land from God. Now, here's a very interesting thing. What we're watching, if we learn something deeper from what we're watching, is that when Hamas came in on Simchas Torah on October 7th and massacred, we're soon going to speak why they did it on that day. It's very, very deep, very deep. So when they massacred hundreds of people, thousands, 1,200 people, in a most brutal way, the world was a shock. Everybody was stunned. And for a while, the world sympathized with the Jewish people. And Israel has a right to defend. Let's always say that. Israel has a right to defend themselves. Until when? Until they actually defend themselves. Israel has a right to defend until they actually defend themselves. And when they defend themselves, no, they don't have a right anymore. But how does the argument work? It works like this. Palestinians are not the Palestinians, the Hamas and the fighters, the terrorists, they're really, really evil people. But most of the Palestinians, they're not Hamas. They're innocent civilians. They're living in there. They want to live a happy life. And Hamas is terrorizing them. Hamas. Why should the innocent Palestinians suffer? And therefore, by bombarding or by doing this, you're causing unnecessary suffering, and so on to the Palestinian people. And that argument has resonated or has created that so well across the world that for months upon months, thank God it quieted down already, but for months upon months across the entire world and on all the college campuses and all over, you had the pro-Palestinian protest saying that Israel is committing genocide. Genocide on who? On the innocent Palestinians. So I'd like to differentiate now on the psychological level, if we're talking about our own land and see the warring factors over here, the two powers. By the way, if you want to see this, exactly what I discussed over here about the war that goes on between these two sides, learn the Tanya, okay, written by the first Chabad Rebbe, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Learn chapter 9 in the first section. He literally discusses over there in chapter 9 the battle. The actual battle of the two souls fighting, each one wanting to take control over the body. And he sees it like two kings. We have a godly soul representing God and an animal soul, a human consciousness that is ignorant of God and trying to take possession like two kings. And the limbs of the body, those are the people, he says. And each one wants full authority over the body. And this is a bloody war throughout a person's life, entire life. You're watching it happen in the land of Israel now. It's a physical manifestation of an internal war that we've been fighting for thousands of years. Humanity has been struggling with these two forces for all this time, between the godly and the ungodly. How do we live life? But here's the interesting thing. When we do something that God says explicitly that we should not do, it's a sin. It's very easy for us to come to a recognition that we failed. And remember, I mentioned earlier, it's a built-in mechanism. We immediately feel so guilty. When we do something wrong, we know it was wrong. Unless we did the sin on many, many times. When we do something wrong many, many times, we get comfortable with it. And we don't even feel guilty about it. The sages talk about it. But in the beginning, time, whatever, we don't feel good when we sin. But then there is the entire section of life where we're not sinning. And we allow ourselves the luxury of indulgence to enjoy things just for the sake of enjoying them without the godly intent. Now, I am not recommending celibacy, if you call it, or what else is the word for it? To become an aesthetic, I think they call it. To become a parish, to become a withdrawn, to become a not engage in anything material. Everything you do in the material world, you could do in the right time and in the right place with a godly intent. You can be enjoying a cup of coffee for a godly intent. Because in the morning when you wake up, the coffee wakes you up and you can pray much better. But if you just had that thought that I'm drinking the coffee, not just because I'm enjoying coffee, because coffee tastes good, but because it's going to wake me up and I'm going to pray now better. I'm going to study better. I'm going to be more alert to do a mitzvah. So I have to, breakfast could be done with that. As I said earlier, all these things could be done. Obviously, sometimes we add a lot of sprinkles to it, and which are not necessary. And then we're going off the path. Yeah. And we're overdoing it. And usually, but here's the thing. Material elements in life that are not for the sake of God means innocent Palestinians who are not terrorists. Now, this is very important. The terrorist, the Hamas guy who comes in stabbing someone, he comes in with a blazing gun. The motorcycles that we watched crossing the Gaza fence into Israel on October 7th, that psychologically represents a sin. That's when the evil inclination comes, the Yetzer Hara breaks down the walls that we create because we want to live a godly life, breaks down those walls, breaches the walls, and comes in and gets us to act against God and literally blows up our life. That's what happens. Because the sin brings so much impurity into a person. It brings death, impurity, unholiness. Because we don't see things, because we don't have eyes to see, we don't see that if, God forbid, we did a sin, it looks like, sadly, some of those towns looked like, if you looked in Be'eri and these various different towns that looked devastated, burnt, scorched, corpses laying around. Sins do that on the metaphysical, spiritual world, but we don't see it. So that's why it doesn't look ugly. But at least we feel deep inside, we feel really bad about it. That's a terrorist. We feel we were infiltrated by a terrorist. And that, most of the time, we understand that we have to fight it. Not always do we have the strength to fight it, to overcome it, but we know it's wrong and we know it's not right. And for most decent people, we don't want to sin. However, when it comes to the innocent Palestinians, that means the non-Jews that are living, that are not blowing up, and they're not stabbing anybody, and they're not harming them, they're saying, what do we want? We just want to live in the land of Israel. That means a person wants to have in their life sections of life that are not holy and they're not forbidden. There's nothing wrong. It means non-Jews should be living in Jewish territory. In other words, make pieces of our lives that it should not be sacred. So that we feel there's nothing wrong with it. We justify, that's okay. And we cry out, why shouldn't I be allowed to do that? Think about it. You know what? Every thought that justifies that, every time we are okay with that, and I'm trying to be harsh because I am with you in this boat. We're all struggle with this. I have a long way to go to make my life sacred and holy and godly 24/7. A long way. Okay, so I'm not speaking over here down as if, I'm there and I'm just talking about the human struggle that we're all part of. But here's the thing. It's part of our mentality that's fine. There's nothing wrong. We go to sleep at night and we do a little counting for the day. We don't regret that. We don't feel there's anything wrong in our life that we forgot about God for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, just because we were busy doing leisurely things without any divine intent. It's perfectly fine. It's okay. What's wrong with it? You know what that is? That's exactly all those thoughts are all those marchers that are marching next to Columbia University and next to Harvard University and all these places that are walking with signs and saying genocide, genocide, genocide. In other words, by trying to kick the mundanity out of our lives, you're committing genocide. You're pushing away innocent civilians, innocent people living in Gaza. They don't want to do anything wrong. They're good people. Yeah. But here's the truth, and this is a deep secret. The deep secret is as follows. It says that when we have sections in our lives, space in our life that we don't introduce God in, then that space in our life, although it's not sin, becomes a breeding ground for sin. That means eventually you will sin. Why do we sometimes, and sometimes more than sometimes, and sometimes more than more times, and sometimes more than more time, have to deal with sins and things that we can't control ourselves, and we do this or do that, and we know we shouldn't, and we feel like we're not in control and just we can't anymore or whatever it is? Why is that our evil inclination is so strong? That's because we gave it space. And here is it that sages teach us a very important secret. That the way the unholy works, the evil inclination works, is he doesn't hit you in one shot. But today he says to you, Hayom amalei aseh kach. Today he says to you, do so. Tomorrow he says to you, do so. And tomorrow he says to you, the next day so. He moves his boundary every day just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. It's like your neighbor who's trying to steal land from you. He's not going to one day come and move your fence over. He's going to put it just a half of an inch. And you see he's not saying anything. You might even notice it. He moves it another half inch. Another half inch. The evil inclination, when he's trying to get into the person, bottom line, what he wants to do is make your life less godly, to remove the godly from the world, to claim the material world. He's not going to start off with big sins. He justifies godless existence, material things for the sake of material pleasure without any godly intent. The more we do so, what happens is when the sin will be introduced, we're so used to giving in to our indulgences. We're so used to spoiling, hear the word again, spoiling our ego. We allow the ego to work out in the gym every single day till the ego built such muscles so strong that when the ego wants to do something that we know we shouldn't do, we have no control over. It's like giving little kids everything they want, and then one day they turn into monsters. That's just what happens. So that's exactly, take a look what happens in Gaza. All the innocent civilians that are living there, we just happened to find out that in this family who's living over here, there happens to be under their child's bedroom a tunnel that goes down that is filled with ammunition and missiles and a factory for terrorist thing. And behind this children's room, there is the book, Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. They found it in almost all the homes in Gaza, and most of the times, the stashes of AK rifles and weapons are in children's bedrooms, between all the innocent, in schools, in hospitals, all the innocent places that are kind of nothing wrong. They themselves are the trapdoors where the terrorists are laying in waiting. So I know it's harsh, but understand what I'm saying is that if when we are Jewish, this applies primarily to Jews, by the way. As a Jew, we are meant to be an expression of God in this world. And therefore, to have sections of our life where God is not present, although it's not anti-God, it is a trapdoor, it's an opening eventually for the impure to come in. But we don't want to hear that. We're terrified of that. We're scared of that. So there's a lot inside of us that fights that. And these are all the 1,000 marchers that were marching all year long screaming, from the river through the sea, Palestine will be free. What that really means is give me more space to be ungodly. Give me more space. So terrorists, you can kill the terrorist, but don't you want to go after the sin in your life? You want to close that? That's okay. But don't stop my ego. That's what the ego is crying. The ego is saying, you want to kill the evil inside of me? Go so. But don't try to stop me from just enjoying my life for the sake of enjoyment. But God is saying, Gewalt, hear me what I'm saying. God is saying, it's the time of redemption has come. I am knocking at the door. God is saying, for 2,000 years, I went back to heaven, but now I'm ready to return to earth. And I want to live in your life. Open up the door for me. Let me in. Let me fill every nook and cranny of your existence. I'm your truth. I want to come back in. And it's not the time now to say no to God and say, you can't come in now. This place is occupied. God says, I want the entire land of Israel, the entire land. Every single part of it, every single speck of it, every part of your life has to be filled with me. It's my land, and me and you are one. You are my other half. You are my wife. A wife and a husband are one. We are one entity. I can't be banished. You can't have sections in your life that I'm not there. I need to be with you everywhere. That's the deeper story of what's going on over here. And this will explain something else. This will explain why Hamas, why God brought about it, that the attack that happened on October 7th happened on that day. Perhaps. By the way, whatever I'm saying now, I'm telling you truths, because they're truths. I'm telling you what it says in Hasidus. So I'm not making this stuff up. The connections that I am making, the associations with the events that are happening in the world, that's, I can't vouch for as absolutely Torah, because I'm the one who thought these thoughts up. So it's not like I'm quoting to you. So the ideas are true, but the connections and the names and all of this that I will share with you, these are all possible ideas, which I thought, and I want people to understand that. I'm not coming over here and saying that this is the way it is 100%, but this is the way it appears to me, and I want to share this because I think it's beneficial for people to hear. Okay. After I made the disclaimer, let's go back. So here's the deal. Here's the story. Let's go a little deeper over here. Human behavior. This isn't, before we continue further, I will understand, based on all of this, we're going to get an understanding of the various different tiers of what where we're going to go with this. Is we're going to understand now instead of what we did till now was we laid out the horizontal, the outer, the outside of the human experience. Now we're going to go deeper into the inside factors of the human experience. Human behavior, whether we're behaving in a godly fashion like we discussed earlier, whether in all aspects of life or only in certain sections of life. And then what sin is, that's a terrorist. What non-Jewish resident is, means non-terrorism, but non-godly. And the Jew is the godly consciousness. Till now, the Jewish resident means the behavior of the body, doing things and living out a godly experience. Okay? So, but we spoke about the outside of it. Now we're going to explore the deeper powers that are underneath it that motivate all of this. So you see, human behavior, which is really, as explained in Tanya, what we're really doing today in this class is really a crash course on so much of the book of Tanya. The human behavior is our action, of course, our action, our speech. Speech is part of behavior, what we say, and even thought. Thinking is behavior. So thought, speech, and action, that's behavior. So we can call that the residents that live in the land. They live outside. The land is the body, and the thought, speech, and thought, speech, and action are the operations of the body. Or in our case of the topography of the land, it's the residents who live in the land. And that are Jewish residents, non-Jewish residents, and monsters. The monsters are the terrorists. That's sin. Jewish residence is either mitzvah observance or even non-mitzvah observance, but with godly intent. Non-Jewish residents who want to live in the land of Israel means, but not terrorists, represent the mundane elements of life that we sometimes want to keep mundane, making the mistake that we can have these mundane sections of life and we can live peace to peace with it. We can live in peace with it. And what we're saying now is it's not terrorism, but they end up being enablers of terrorism. It's these aspects of the gray area of life, when they're not with godly intent, will inevitably become a safe haven or a harboring place for terrorism in the spiritual sense, meaning that which wants to blow our life apart by introducing sin and the like in our life. Okay. Now let's take a look, however, beneath the outside behavioral level and look at the motivation of behavior. Where does behavior come from? Behavior comes from the inner world of the human being. What's the inner world of the human being? Our emotions, all right? How we feel, our loves, our passions, our desires, and the like. And then our intelligence. There is intelligence, there is emotion. Okay? These are called the powers of the soul. These are the internal powers of the soul. Now, being that we have two beings inside of us, as we spoke earlier about the two passengers in the car, two beings, what that means is that the steering wheel that is being pulled to this side of the car or that side of the car by these two beings, why are these beings different? Why is this one want to drive the car north and the other one wants to take the car south? It's because they have two different desires. It's because they have two different philosophies, and their emotional structure is different. In other words, the godly soul has holy emotion. That means our two souls are not just two conflicting engines of behavior. They are two beings with an entire persona. So our godly soul, our holy soul, has a holy intelligence. It understands, it knows God, and its emotions, its love, its fear, and its compassion is all in the right place. It's all tuned into the ultimate reality, which is God. Then our animal soul, our animal consciousness, has a philosophy. It's the philosophy of, let me live. And it has explanations to life. It doesn't want to explain everything in life. It sees the natural world as a very much natural world. It doesn't believe in miracles. It doesn't want to know miracles. It doesn't want to know that there is a higher than nature. Everything it wants to explain scientifically and logically, because that takes God out of the picture. And then based on that, it has a whole slew of emotions. What its emotions, all of its loves, it loves all kinds of material pleasures for the sake of the material. All of its fears and hang-ups and whatever it is, its anger and its rage, all that stuff that make up the inside world of our ego, of our animal soul. Okay, so these are the two powers, meaning the inner world, the powers of the soul, of the godly soul, of the holy soul, and the unholy soul. Now that's deeper. That's not on the land. As we're soon going to see that it's represented in nations today that live around Israel. The people that are living in Gaza, The people that are living in the territory itself represent the behavior, the action, the actual land itself. The powers behind it, which are the emotions and the intelligence, is already a step deeper. Now, the truth is, the land of Israel is called the land of 7 nations. So initially there were 7 nations that lived there. So what that really means is that part of the land itself, we might say like this, the residents of the land, that's the thought, speech, and action, the behavior. The land itself is the land of 7, that's the emotions. Now, the land of Israel essentially is a holy land. So it's really the territory of the godly soul, which means the emotions that are really there, that are supposed to, again, the land of Israel is meant for Jews to live there. What's going to produce Jewish behavior? Think about it. What's going, if Jews living in the land of Israel, metaphorically, as we turn it into the psychological range inside the human physical body, what does that mean? How do we get Jewish behavior? We need to have people that have Jewish emotions. What are the Jewish emotions? Jew means godly. So the Jewish emotions really mean the emotions of the godly soul, which are holy emotions. So the land of Israel itself, the land of all 7 nations that live there, really, once it becomes the land of Israel, it's still a land of 7, but it's the land of the 7 nations. It becomes the territory of the godly soul. So the emotions and the behavior, the emotions is the land itself, and the behavior, the residents of the land, are the thought, speech, and actions, the expressions of it. Okay? But before emotion is intelligence. It's the world view. The holy soul, the godly soul, has a perception of life. Its understanding of reality is the reality of God. The animal soul, which comes from the world of darkness, has a distorted understanding of reality. Distorted, not that it's evil. It just does not see God in reality. It sees everything from the perspective of science. Everything is just the way. This is the way it is. This is the natural world. Everything is nature. But and it might be very sophisticated in it. That's its intelligence. It's not a holy intelligence. So that's a step deeper. Now there's something deeper even than intelligence. And that is the essential drive. Essential drive. What's drive? Or drive sometimes is referred to as will. Will. What does will mean? We all identify within ourselves that we have drive and will that not always is driven or by reason. Right? Our reason, which means when we study, when we get to know things, and based on that, we get emotional. We get emotions that build on that philosophy. There's a philosophy to life. That philosophy creates emotions, and then the emotions are implemented in behavior. It's the order of the way things work. But then we all notice within ourselves that there are certain drives that are much stronger than our intelligence. And so it can be like will. We have, so you ask me, why do I want that? I can't explain it. I just want it. And usually when we're dealing with raw, pure will, now most will really, if we're a healthy human being, our drives and our wants are slowed down a little bit. How do they get slowed down? Because when the drive and the will, which is more like the super soul, when if it was to come out without, and God created the mind, acts as a filter. The mind acts like a check, like a border patrol. When the raw drive of the human being would, if the raw drive of a human being would come out without a border check, without a TSA at the border, then it would actually come out and we would all be maniacs. Maniacs means we would have like these crazy, insane drives and we wouldn't be able to reason with anybody. Because the drive of the soul is like almost like infinite. It's beyond whatever. And that's really what a crazy person is, people that are sadly mentally inept, is because the filter of the mind isn't there. And usually these people, by the way, when someone is crazy, is very dangerous. A lot of times you can't have, like 10 policemen can't hold down one crazy person, because the energy that there is when see, what the intellect does is the intellect acts as a filter. It holds the drive back, and when it comes out, comes through a filtered reason. If a person sees themselves as a reasonable person, then they know that even if I have drive, the drive has to be stopped. It has to make sense in my head. My head has to agree to it. From the logic will come, and then emotions will go to behavior. So what we're watching over, but the drive is really, that's what when I'm saying drive, that's what I mean, pure will. Now, we find that hopefully a healthy person is a person, someone who's mentally stable and healthy, is someone whose reason acts as a real check that allows enough drive in that our life should be juicy and with energy and with power, but does not allow the drive to come forth with all of its potency and its energy, because it would create a flood. It would completely flood. It would be terrible. But we do find, take a look, I'll give you an example, where a lot of times some of these essential drives of a human being bypass the filter. You know, the filter is not strong to hold them, and there are certain things that cause that. And what happens is these essential, even if a person is not a crazy person, not a mentally retarded person, a person could be a sane individual, but they don't have their filter of the reason and rationale and reason is not strong enough to slow down the essential drive of the soul. And as a result of that, they have certain behaviors that they can't control even when they know it's wrong. In modern terminology, as we would call it, that's addiction. What's addiction? Addiction is when you know you're driving your car off a cliff. You know your behaviors are really destroying your life. You know you're doing this, but you can't stop. You're an addict. If you're an alcoholic, if you're this, if you're that, these addictions, or addicted to drug or whatever it is, these addictions come and can literally take smart, insane people, and they have no control over themselves. So what does that mean? That's the level of drive, ratzon, will, pure. That level of soul is called the crown, keter, the crown. Very powerful energy. Now, this is the human psyche that we just laid out over here. However, being that the human is made up of two separate souls to add to the complexity, we're going to have all these features existing in both modes, the godly mode and the human mode, the holy soul and the non-holy soul. So in the non-holy soul, we know what behavior is. And again, we're not talking about evil behavior. We're just talking about non-godly behavior, stuff that doesn't take God into consideration. Beneath, driving the thought, speech, and action are the emotions. Driving the emotions is the intelligence, and higher than the intelligence is the super rational drives that a person has, which hopefully we should be able to curtail and control. Sadly, a lot of times it gets through and it makes break. And if it's from the animal soul, it's really not good. When the animal soul's drives that are not coming through intelligence, even the intellect of the animal soul, it doesn't get certified by the intellect of the animal soul. It just comes out with all of its ferociousness. That can be very dangerous in life. But what is that? These are drives of the selfish self that are limitless. Okay, meaning there's no stop. It's pure will. Okay. Now let's take a look at the godly soul. Our godly consciousness also has its behavior, thought, speech, and action. It also has emotion. It also has intelligence. And deeper than that is that it has super rational drive. Now, in the godly soul, it's actually a really good thing. Because as much as our intelligence can be a motivator to know God and to drive us towards godly things, the intelligence is limited. Because no matter how smart we are, we're only so smart. And God is infinite. So there's only a limit. If we can unleash the drive, the essential drive of the holy soul, and allow that to come. And here it's good to step aside and allow that to go unfiltered into the consciousness. It creates a certain madness and a certain craziness, insanity, but a wholly positive insanity that gets us sometimes to go beyond the borders of normal for holiness, which is a good thing. It will make you not sleep at night because you're busy volunteering and doing good and helping people, even if it'll make you put your life at risk sometimes to help people out, to do good things. It will cause you to devote yourself towards what's right and what's correct, and to the point that other people say you're crazy. And that's a good thing because it's good things you're doing. Okay? So you have these, in both souls, you have behavior and then emotion, intellect, and before that, ratzon, desire, which is already part of the keser world, the crown, because it's above your head. It's the part of the infinite range of the soul, in a holy way and in an unholy way. Now, let's take it a step deeper. Is there anything deeper than that? Is there something even deeper than drive? There's one thing that's deeper than drive, and that is not your drive, but you yourself. What does drive mean? I am driven, but who is I? I is your essence. So if you dig deeper even than drive, you follow the drive. Where is the drive coming from? Who is driven? There is an I there that's driven. Who's the I? Wow. So who's the I? I is the essence of our soul. That level of soul is called yechida. That's the deepest essence. That's our very identity. So in the godly soul, our very identity is that our soul is God's wife, which means our soul is a piece of God. It's the part of the Shekhinah. It's a recipient of God's infinity. That's its identity. That's its essence. Because it's its essence, that's why it's driven with divine zeal and zest and drive and will to implement God's will. But it is a piece of God. That's its essence. From the essence comes the drive. After filtration happens, comes intelligence, comes emotions, comes behavior. How about in our unholy soul? There is also an identity. Under the drive is an identity. What's the identity? The identity of the ego. But who is that? What is that? It's very interesting. The essence of the animal soul, the essence of the unholy, since unholy really doesn't really have a truth to it, so it's a very fake essence. It's an essence, but it's more like a smokescreen of essence. It doesn't really, it's there. It has an identity, but a very, you would think that the identity, if you drill into the godly soul, you'll get to a very powerful being. That's the essence of the godly soul, which is one with God. But if you're drilling deep, deep, deep under your unholy drives, and what are you finding? An imposter. A being that really is not of real solid material, because now God gave it an existence. It's not the essence of evil, it's the essence of darkness, it is, but at the essence it doesn't really have much substance. That's why in Kabbalah it says that there is no yechida really in the animal soul, in the unholy. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. It means that it's very plastic. There's nothing really strong. And therefore, the drive, it's really on the outside. It's like this really, really weak entity, but that can create a lot of noise and a lot of smoke, and as if it's something really important, and it has a powerful drive. But at the core, it's there, but it's now without that, you wouldn't have the drive, and without the drive. So it is an element of essence, but I'm pointing that I'm pointing that on purpose because it's important to know that the essence of the godly is one with God himself. The essence of the unholy is really lacking essence. It's a fraudulent entity. But that's the point of its fraudulency. But there is such an entity. Now, here's an interesting thing. Here's a very interesting thing. This is so important. When I say me or you or anybody listening to this class, when we say I, who is talking? Who's that I? Is the I my godly soul, my higher self, my idealistic self? Or is my I my brute animal, selfish self? Which I is speaking? Who's the I? So in Tanya, he says something really interesting. Of course, on a very, very hidden, deep, core, essential level, our deepest, truest I is our soul, of course. But when we are conscious of I, for most of us that are not very super righteous and holy, for most of us, our I, our sense of being is the distorted I. If our I would be our soul, and if our conscious sense of existence would be our soul, then we wouldn't have all these battles. We wouldn't be in the struggle so much because naturally everything will flow in a godly way. If the sense of my very existence is that I'm a piece of God here to express God, then naturally the godliness would flow. And even if I had some evil inclination that would try to buzz me and try to distract me, it wouldn't be too successful because the I, the very sense of existence it's almost like, we would be conscious of someone when you're driving in the car, we would be conscious of someone trying to steer, to grab the steering wheel. Imagine, you have sometimes carjacking. So you're in a car, you're driving, someone jumped into the car, they're trying to steer the car away. You're going to fight it. Why is it that it's not we don't know, so much of our life, we don't even feel like we're in the driver's seat. Someone else is, the godly is not in the driver, the animal soul's in the driver, and we're not even aware of it. We let it happen. Sometimes the reason is because the I in our life, the primary sense of being, the seat of I is sensed, our animal I is sensed more as our I than our godly self. And here's very interesting. And I'll give you an interesting illustration. This comes from the Sefer of Rev Dessler, who is a great Lithuanian Musar person, but people don't know, and it's a very, very deep Sefer. People don't know that a lot of his machshava, a lot of his thoughts, deep thoughts, he studied Tanya. He lived in England. In the beginning, before he was Mashgiach in Panovich, and he had a chavrusa who learned with him Tanya. And a lot of the deep thoughts that make it so appealing in a book, Michtav Meliov, those of you who know what I'm talking about, it's because he's taking from Chassidus. And I even know who his chavrusa was. I forgot his name. We used to study with, a study partner. In any case, so he illustrates this very much. He says, if you listen quietly to when the voice that's talking, when we want to do something good and holy. In other words, when it's time to go pray or it's time to go to study, you'll hear a subtle voice saying, or when we're frustrated why there's not enough good things happening in our life, in the sense that we're not living up to the way to the expectations. It usually sounds like someone else rebuking us. It sounds like something like this. Why are you so lazy? Why are you so why don't you go and get involved? The voice is like someone talking to us. But when we feel an urge to eat, it's never like, oh, you should go eat. It's, I'm hungry. I'm tired. I need a vacation. The animal soul has claimed the I. The godly soul sits on the side and says, you should. So therefore, and now this is really, it says, the Alter Rebbe says this in Tanya. He says the Art Tzaddikim, like Hillel was a great saint, and Hillel would say to his students when lunchtime came, he would say like this. He would say, let's go do a favor to the poor creature that needs to eat. He looked at his body as if it was this creature. It needs to eat. It needs fuel. Let's go do a favor and fuel her up. It's almost like you're talking to your car. Oh, you need gas. Let's go to the gas station and fill you up with gas. Imagine if every time we need to eat, we would feel that way. This body is a body. It needs to be taken care of. It should now got lunch. It should be fed. And so we don't feel that way. It's I am hungry. I need to eat. What's for dinner? The I, because the sense of I by most of us is our animal soul. As much as we said that I is a fraud, but it still is, it occupies the seat, the center of our being. Now, how do we deal? Now, here's the thing. Doesn't mean that everything we do in our life is pure ego and not holy, because the godly soul is sitting on the passenger seat and is constantly trying to steer the car where it wants to steer. Using what? Using reason, using its emotions, using its reason, and trying to interact with the I to get the I to hear a deeper purpose in life. In other words, let me put it this way. Today's days until Mashiach comes, until the redemption, for most of us, until the redemption, we live, we're trying, we do godly things, we feel sometimes godly feelings, we perceive many times with a godly mind. However, it's within the context of an ungodly existence. Or better, our operating system is our animal soul, is a non-godly system, but we are running depending on how hard we work, we're running a godly program. We're running the program of the soul with an animal conscious operating system. The underlying sense of self is unholy, and we're introducing holiness kind of from the outside. I don't know if a good example would be is like using an Apple computer and running a Android or a what is it called, a IBM or whatever they call it, programs. So obviously, it's it's a little clumsy. Doesn't work too well. What's going to be so great when Mashiach comes? When Mashiach will come, our godly essence will be revealed. The true I will then come into our consciousness. The animal I will completely dissipate. And then we will really, really feel our true I, which is our soul, which is one with God. And then all of our behavior naturally will flow as purely godly and holy 24/7. All the time in everything we do. Now, until Mashiach comes, until we reach that time when we can free ourselves on that very deep level, we can move the sense of I of our unholy self. If that I, until Mashiach comes, when we will be able to remove that. Until then, we're operating from at the core consciousness of self. It's not necessarily holy. The I that we're feeling is the unholy. Does that mean that we can never, ever, that we don't have moments when our deeper I opens up? It doesn't mean that. we have the opportunity, even today's days, even until Mashiach comes, and even for ordinary people, not big tzaddikim like Hillel, not great saintly people who are living that way. We have moments when the superficial eye, the curtains move, the superficial eye gets pushed away, and our deeper sense of I, we really from a deep place feel, I am a Jew. I want to do mitzvot. I love you, God. My entire being, my I is holy. When is that? Those are special moments in the year. First of all, a person can come to that any time of the year. You have a moment of tshuva, a moment of a deep moment. Something happens in your life that shakes you to the core and breaks your kind of throws you off. And as a result of that, the fake facade sense of self falls away. And you're heartbroken, and suddenly you feel this much deeper I, that the godly, deeper faith and the deeper connection comes forth. That can happen. But also in the times of the year, we know that Rosh Hashanah, the high holiday, is coming soon. The high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. It's almost like we're at complete transformation. The month of Elul that comes before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. This is a whole time period in which we have a deep shift, not only in behavior, but a deeper I emerges. And that's why it's so interesting, if anybody you can all probably attest to this, that sometimes it's so hard to understand how during the high holidays, our consciousness can be so lofty and so devoted and so committed and so we feel so much part of the divine program. And we look at ourselves a month or two later and we don't recognize ourselves. We're completely lost it all, and we're in a complete different headspace. And what was important, to us, Rosh Hashanah, is not important now anymore. And what is important now was so superficial and meaningless on the high holidays. But now it's like everything to us. So what happened? How was it? Since you wonder, like, when was it? Was I lying? Was I completely off? Am I just fooling myself? The answer is no. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, this is a period of the year, and Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeret, as we're going to soon see, Simchas Torah. This is the peak of it. That's the time that God gives ordinary people, regular people, whose consciousness is the animal consciousness, to experience soul consciousness. The deeper self is then opened up. We move into a much deeper godlier, and then we experience the I. And then with all of our being, we only want goodness. We only want godliness in our life. We only want truth. It's just when Simchas Torah is over and we go away from the high holidays, we go back a week or two, slowly, if we don't really, really work very hard, and even if we work hard, it's going to wear off. Slowly, the deeper, higher, godly self is going to move to the side, and the more egotistical I is going to take center stage of self. Doesn't mean that your behavior is going to have to give. Doesn't mean that you're on the practical level you're not living godly. You can still do so, but it's more like somebody from the outside influencing, as opposed to internally. This is who I am. Okay. Based on this, we'll understand what happened on October 7th. You see, this whole system that God allows us to have these deep moments of deeper truths on Simchas Torah, on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, high holidays, is a system that is put into place for the time of exile, which means during the time when we are navigating a very ungodly world, and the entire world is shrouded in darkness, and God knows for most of us, it's impossible for us to maintain the godly. As we say, in the time of exile, non-Jews live in the Jewish land, which means spiritually in ourselves as well. There's a part of us that's very not Jewish. That's just what it is. And therefore, the I, even the sense of I, of the animal, the klipa, of the unholy, is going to muscle its way in. God knows that. And God wants us to have at least some anchor, some center, some central space, a place that we can realign ourselves continuously. Or else, if we would never be able to come to that sacred space, we would be kaput. We would be over. We would be so flushed out by the darkness of the world. We would never be able to fulfill our purpose in this world. So God gives us an escape route. He gives us kind of a suspension button. We can suspend our ordinary consciousness for a month in the year and go into the deeper, higher place. So it's perfectly fine to say that on the high holidays, I'm in a state of intimacy with God. I'm in a state of closeness with Hashem. I'm in a state of experiencing the deepest truth. And I shouldn't ever think that I'm a hypocrite because all year long I'm not that way. God understands that there is a shift. There is a deep shift that takes place inside of us, and he allows it, and he intended it to be that way. However, when it comes time, as we discussed earlier, that God is knocking on the door, and it's time for the redemption, it's time for the world to switch. It's time for the Jewish people to come back to the land of Israel. It's time for God to move down into this world permanently and live in a fully revealed way in this world. Then it's not good enough that we can't just have a moment of sacredness, a moment of godliness, if we are, because here's the thing. When your eye is your neshama, your soul, your sense of being is your soul, then you have no Palestinians living in your land. In other words, the fact that we can section pieces of our life and make it godly and sections of our life being ungodly, the compartmentalizing is only when a person's eye is unholy and you're interjecting holiness from the outside, then it allows itself to be compartmentalized. However, when a person, reaches a point where their entire being is their godly soul, then automatically, if my eye is my, so why would there be anything in my life that's not holy? So what God then says on Simchas Torah, and he says, listen here. The way I gave this example on Shabbos, all these thoughts that I'm sharing with you now hit me this past Shabbat. And I spoke about it in Shul. Not as long. I gave a very crash course on all of this, very short talk. But now I'm elaborating on it. But the way I explained it in Shul this past Shabbos is something as follows. On Simchas Torah is the time for intimacy. And I mentioned it in our last class number 1 on this. It's a time, what's intimacy? Intimacy is where husband and wife become one flesh. And there's no concealments. That means there's no garments, there's nothing. They merge together. So what does that mean to be intimate with God? God's ultimate truth is received in our souls. And on Sukkot, on Simchas Torah, that's what it is. We spend the entire time in shul, in synagogue. We dance with the Holy Torah. We melt into the Torah. We claim that there's no other reality other than God. We're living the ultimate divine truth. We're fully recipients of that. We're being intimate with God. But we all know that a lot of times when you're trying to be intimate with your spouse, if you have issues that you didn't work out yet, you can't, if it's very possible that if you aggravated your wife during the day, let's say you were planning, it was going to be that you were going to have an intimacy. She happened to be 5 minutes before the intimacy. She walked into the kitchen. She told you already 30 times she does not like it when you leave your dishes on the table or you leave the shoes under the table, put it away in the closet. And you just, either clumsiness or ignoring or whatever it is, you just don't take her seriously and you didn't do it. Or the vice versa. The man has his things he really doesn't like, his wife does. And then you're coming into the intimacy, and guess what? This can really, really ruin the mood. And I won't allow it. Even though, on a deep level, I love you so much, I would give my entire life for you. Yeah. And if so, a basic, simple wish. I do not like when those dishes are on the table. You ate dinner, go and put your dish in the sink. And how many times do I have to tell you? Or put it in the dishwasher. Why can't you do that? Why is your shoes under the table? In other words, you're annoying me in your behavior. And then you want me to be intimate with you and you want me to give you my entire being. And that's really the story. And if you take a look at the story, what happened on Simchas Torah is basically as follows. We were trying to be intimate with God, And the Palestinians broke through the border and came and ruined our intimacy. Meaning to say, the inhabitants, it's because we let them stay in the land. Who created, just in the physical story, the Jewish people, Israel was once controlling Gaza. They moved away. They let the Gazans make their own government. And what did they do? They made tunnels and they built an infrastructure of thousands and thousands of weapons. And then they came into, not just in their territory, which is really our territory, and then came from there into the land and butchered people. So what really the point over here is, and the problem with is ultimately, and again, I'm not saying the solution that we drive all the Palestinians out of Israel. I don't know how that's going to be implemented without Mashiach. But I'm saying the concept is a concept that the Torah says, this is a Jewish land, Palestinians should not be there. That's like the dishes that are not supposed to be on the table. I told you I don't like them there. God is saying, this is not who I want. These are not. So when you're basically the psychological, spiritual message of what happened this year, Simchas Torah, is God is saying, you got to clean up the land of Israel. You want to have intimacy in our bedroom, we're going to have an intimacy. We don't want anybody disturbing this intimacy. So if you're having all these people over here around that are going to disturb these, in other words, elements in the land of Israel that I can't tolerate and I don't want, if you think that that's okay, that's my external life. That's my life 3 months after Simchas Torah. That's my life 6 months after Simchas Torah. There's parts of my life that are not God. That's okay. And again, first of all, definitely if we allow terrorists to live there, that's sin. But even if there's no terrorists living there, and it's just mundane life, as we discussed earlier, the meaning of the Gazans that are not terrorists, it's still part of what denies God, what denies God's exclusivity, his only reality. And you can't have that in your land. You can't have that if we're going to live together in every day, if I'm not just coming to visit you once a year, but we're living together in our home, you can't have parts of the home that I can't walk into, God says. That I'm not welcome in. That it's just off limits to me. It's my home. I'm everywhere. Doesn't mean that a husband has to stick his head into every space of his wife's thing. But the general idea is a home can't be cordoned off where you have no access. This is my space. God says this is shared space. It's all of us together. And in that sense, so this was the deeper meaning of this attack. It's basically a reminder to all of us. We have a Palestinian problem. And there is not going to be a two-state solution. We're going to have to ask the Palestinians very, very, very gently and smoothly to please move elsewhere. And I mean that in our psychological self, in the internal story. On the bigger story, I'm not in control of what Israel should probably do that. We'll ask to figure out a way to get the Palestinians to move out because it's never going to work. It's just never going to work. But in our internal story, we have to understand that's what it means. The time has ended for Klippa life. It's not okay to live anymore Klippa life. And what happened this year? When most of us hear that Mashiach is coming and we're about to change and life is going to change and it's going to become sacred 24/7, how many of us are ready to accept that joyfully? And how many of us have Columbia University protesters and Harvard protesters, the elites, that's the intelligence. The intelligence of our animal soul says, come on, leave me alone. What's wrong? It's kosher. It's permitted. Why can't I have aspects of life that are not godly? And God says it's great, but then it's not our home. You want to just have Simchas Torah, a moment of intimacy, and the rest of the year you're going to live in it doesn't work anymore. It's time for the redemption. It's time for reunion. It's time for me and you to be one all the time. Okay, got that? That's the crust of it. Now, let's bring in what happened in the last couple of weeks with the forces of evil being taken down. Wow, it's already 2 hours and 8 minutes. It's a much longer class than I expected. But I guess to explain these concepts, take a little while. So let's go now deeper. Let's see what's going on over here. The terrorists that are living in Gaza and the fight in Gaza, that's Israel territory in the human psychological battle that represents, as we spoke earlier, behavior. Behavior, thought, speech, and action. Jewish thought, speech, and action, non-Jewish thought, speech, and action. Infiltration of terrorists, that's sin. Fine, it's all the arena of behavior. The land itself, emotion. Emotion is very much part of our everyday experience. That's on the surface. Unholy emotion, unholy lust, desires, and no good should be out. The land itself, that's the topography of the land, the 7 emotions are holy. But then there is the ideology, the mindset. That's a deeper level. And then there is the drive that we discussed earlier, the drive of the animal soul. We're getting deeper. So you're going to see that in the Palestinian cause, there's tears. There are the ones that were actually that are on the land itself, where the battle is taking place, on the actual land territory of Israel. And then there are supporters of Gaza from the outside. These are going to represent deeper levels of the consciousness. But let's go all the way to the essence. The essence, who's the leader of Hamas? The leader of Hamas, his name, at least till a week ago, was, as we said earlier, Ismail Haniya. Now, if Hamas means, think about this, if Hamas means an evil entity whose business is, his entire business is to steal, Hamas means stealing, stolen, to steal, to rob the material world away from God, to steal, to claim ownership of what really doesn't belong to him. The snake does not own this world because the snake did not create it. The Satan does not own this world because he didn't create it. Actually, Satan is a creation by God, and the snake is also. But he created them to be troublemakers and to claim that they own it. So that's Hamas. Who is the leader? The leader's name is Haniya. I'm going to focus not on his first name, but on his last name. Or was Haniya. What does Haniya mean? Watch this amazing thing. So in last week's Torah portion, Parshas Matos and Maseh, where you actually see, where it speaks about, when we spoke in the first class about the death of Haniya, because it speaks about a person who leaves his safe haven, and he comes. So the word, in the same Torah portion, you have the root of the word Haniya twice. Parshas Matos. This is the week of his elimination. In the beginning of the Torah portion, it says, if a woman makes a vow, and she's in her father's house, she's a young girl, she makes a vow, her father can prevent her from keeping the vow. He can dissuade her and he can prevent her. The words it uses over here is, this is in the book of Numbers, chapter 30, verse number 6. If her father restrained her. Okay? The word Haini is the same word as Haniya, as we're going to see soon. The root of the word. So Rashi's interpreting the word. This instance of Hana, Rashi says, the word root of Hana means removing, withholding. Eino yedei mahi. I did not know what the meaning is not obvious. Okay? And then Rashi proves, however, have a oimer, but over here, Hana zu hafara. This Hana means nullification. Upshutai, and the word simple meaning, lashemeniya v'asara, is that it expresses withholding and removal. Lama sinion, and similarly, sinion is literally, why do you remove? Where does that say that? Later in Parshas Maseh, it says when the tribe of Gad and Ruvain were asking for a land, that Moses give them the land on the eastern banks of the Jordan. Moshe gets upset at them and he says, why are you dissuading the heart of the people? Why are you turning them away? Why are you dissuading their hearts from You're causing the people to get frightened. They think that your reason you don't want to join in the final campaign to conquer Israel is because you are afraid. And therefore, you're going to cause the other people also. So the word it uses the same word, sinuyin. Sinuyin means siniyun, which means, why do you remove? Restrain, remove, dissuading. It's all the same idea. So what does that mean? God created an evil inclination. He created an entity, a klipa, a sitra ach, the other side, which its objective is to create a challenge for God to have this world. God wants a home in this world. This is a force that claims God's real estate. It claims the land. That's why it's called Hamas. It's stealing it. But how will it steal it? It will restrain or dissuade or turn away the hearts of people from God, from tuning into truth. In other words, the power of the essence of the evil inclination, or the essence of the headquarters of evil, it's all a dissuading power. It's meant to turn off. And Rashi even uses over here, there's similar words that says, "V'yadaitem es tnuasi." God says, and you will know what happens when you turn away from me. And similarly to nuasi, and you shall know what parting from me means. Means to part, to turn away. Asashasartem, you having turned away from me. So the word tenuin, Rashi says, is also related to the word sartem. The sartem vavadetem, you will turn away from me. So the essence of Hamas, which Hamas means to rob the world away from God, is by creating within the human heart a being that turns us away, that doesn't see existence as godly and for a divine purpose, but turns away into selfhood, into selfishness, into something other than Hashem. And that's the essence. And that's why the leader of Hamas, his name was Haniya. But that's a level of the klipa, as we said earlier. If you dig deeper beyond the unholy drive, we spoke earlier about there is intellect and there is drive, and the drive, especially when the drive is not curtailed by the mind, it can become so powerful. But what's beneath it? Beneath it is the essence of it. The essence of it is a fraudulent force that is meant for one purpose. It's meant to lie, but it's meant to turn away. To turn away the heart of humanity from God. To move the human race away from its purpose. So it manifested in a man called Haniya. And it's interesting, where was he hiding? He doesn't live on the territory, because in the territory of Israel itself, that's the place of action. That's the level, that's expression. We're dealing with much earlier than expression. We're going deep, deep, deep into the core of the human experience to find out, where does it all come from? It calls from deep inside. There is as God created us with a soul, and immediately covering the soul, the essence of the soul, is something that turns us away from the soul, turns us away from disfocuses us, causes us to go in a different direction. And it's interesting. That's why Haniya lived where? Is hiding out in Qatar. Qatar, I'm thinking, what's the word Qatar? The word Qatar is from the word keter. Keter means crown. That's the level of crown. The crown of klipa. Crown is always associated with essence. So the crown of the unholy, the crown of the klipa, that's Haniya. Haniya turning away from God. A force of dissuasion. What did the snake do? The first thing, dissuade. It turns Eve away from the fulfillment of God's purpose. By doing what? By talking to her egotistical talk. Think about it. She's there to be a caretaker of the garden. She didn't think for 1 second about her pleasure. God told her, this you should eat. You should eat, of course. You should eat from all, because you need fuel to serve me. And he starts talking to her about, oh, take a look how beautiful these fruits are. It's so delicious. It's so good. He started speaking to her about her sensual experience of the thing. And the woman saw that the food is good to eat. And the thing. Suddenly, she becomes, her experience, her pleasure, and her delight becomes the focal point of what life is about. You're just on day one. God just hired you on the job to be his caretaker. You're already busy with yourself. That's the dissuasion. That's Haniya. That's the keser of klipa. That's the core of it. That's why he lives in Qatar. Qatar also comes from the word knotted. Keter from the word ketoris. Bachat ketira. Because this is the point where the unholy is, this is it's knotted. This is it's anchored. It's anchored in this level. I mean, there's based on a different mimer, there's more to say over here that there's no real, okay, let's leave it for now because it's going to be a little too confusing. But this is the idea. It's the keser. This is the keser level of klipa, of the unholy. Very, very deep, meaning very deep in the superconscious or in the subconscious of evil. As this dissuading, this entity of unholiness, that's a dissuader, that's a restrainer, trying to stop man from fulfilling his or her purpose, trying to dissuade us to something else. In other words, the very sense of I that is misinterpreted. The I, the unholy I, that's a dissuasion from the real thing. Because again, it has no substance to self other than it's meant to be it's meant to be an imposter to cover up the truth of life. That's its essence. Its essence is a cover up. Okay. But once it knows its mission to persuade and dissuade the human race and the klipa knows its purpose, that it's meant to stop or to get in the way, or at least to create a challenge for the service of, to create a challenge in the human experience from us fulfilling our purpose and living the godly life. The next stage, also premortal, very early stage, still far away from behavior. The next stage is this unholy I, this distorted sense of excuse me, this distorted sense of being. Now, what has desire? What instead of it God's desires, now it's my desires. And as we said before, it has drive. What kind of drive? As we said before, the initial drive before it goes through the mind can rationalize it. It's just drive. Drive of self-fulfillment, drive of self-indulgence. We discussed earlier where all addiction comes from, where all crazy commitment to unholiness without an end, limitless. So much so, and listen to this, and in order to justify, not just to justify, it creates drive. It also creates a distorted sense of reality. It lies. It immediately has to lie. If you know anything about the Hamas guys, Haniya, these were the most expert liars. These people were like, they were born to lie. They had lying down to a art to be able to tell falsehoods with a straight face. So spiritually, it's deception and lying. So it creates a false narrative. It creates a false story. And the false story is already moving into this drive, and there is intoxicated drive, like you would say, crazy drive. And then as it goes into intelligence, it becomes the false intelligence. It becomes the lies that the mind can concoct to support the falsehood of this entity of distortion. So that's why closer to the land of Israel, but still not in the territory, but outside of the land of Israel, is another force called Hezbollah. Now, I wanted to look up in Wikipedia or whatever online what the word Hezbollah means, what they actually called it. I couldn't crack the code based on the spelling of it, what it means in the spiritual etymology. I thought maybe if I look at what the word means, at least in the Arabic sense, maybe I would know. But I didn't get a chance to look that up. I thought about doing it today, so I didn't get there. So maybe one of the listeners will do the research and send it to me. But in any case, that's Hezbollah. But the guy and the person, their leader, that was taken out, his name was Shukar. So I'm thinking about the word Shukar. The word Shukar is from the same word as Sheker. Sheker means lies. It's the lies that the animals, it's a narrative, it's a full story that the animal soul creates. There is the essence of it, and there is its production. So it's interesting. Qatar, the Qataris themselves, they're just a safe haven for Haniya, and they're funding the entire Hamas, but they're not actively shooting missiles. They're way beyond. They're the underlying darkness. They're the platform. But Lebanon and Hezbollah, they're attacking. They're actually attacking with missiles. They're attacking with rockets. They're killing people. They're maiming people. They're injuring people. That's where the animal soul begins to fire off lies. And as a result of this lies, brings about into the human experience all kinds of negative things. So the leader that was there, his name was Shukar. Shukar meaning lies. Also, the word Shukar means drunkenness. Like the word shikar. Shikar means drunk. Which drunkenness in general can imply to a person who is driven by drive, uninhibited by the intellect. Because what does intoxication do? Intoxication is a form of removal of the filter, so that the essential drives of the person, the limitless drives, come forth. That's why when a person is drunk, they don't control themselves, because there's no checks and balances. There's no filter. There's no border control. The TSA is out for lunch. So then anybody can pass. So the emotion, the drive comes out with all of its, and that's the danger of a drunkard person, like we said before, like a person who's mentally challenged. And that's why addiction is a form of drunkardness. It's a form of intoxication. It's because of whatever experience, thrill a person gets from something that they do. It triggers something in their mind, and that it's so intense that they can't control it. So this is all related to shakar. It means lies. Now, it's very interesting that Lebanon is closer to Israel than Qatar. Now, Lebanon I looked up, what is the spiritual meaning of Lebanon? So the word Lebanon in Hebrew comes from the word Levanon. Levanon is from the word Lavan. Lavan means whiteness. So in holiness, there is a level called the Cedars of Lebanon. The holy temple is called Lebanon. The Beis Hamikdash, Moshe says, I want to see the mountain. I want to see the Es HaLevanon. And Rashi explains it means the holy temple. So Levanon is the Beis Hamikdash. In holiness, it exists. So what does it refer to? So again, it's in the holy, it's in the unholy. So in the various different Kabbalistic books, it gives two interpretations of Lebanon. According to one interpretation, it's associated with the level of intellect. Because the word Lebanon is from the word Lamed Beis, and it has the word Lamed Beis, which we know there are 32 pathways of Chachma. Lamed Beis Nasiv is Chachma. And Nun is Nun Shari Bina. There are 50 gates of Bina. So Nun is 50. So it's Chachma and Bina together. According to that, Lebanon represents the intellectual element, the chachma and the bina, the intellect. That's I think, in Sefer Ma'ora Or. I'm not looking it up right now, which is one Kabbalah Sefer, very, very much used in Chassidus, to determine the essence of something. It has an encyclopedia, according to Kabbalah, of words. And he says that Lebanon is Lamed Beis Nun, which is Chachma and Bina. Okay? Wisdom. So then it would refer to the intellect. And that's why it's not inside the land of Israel, because the land of Israel itself are the 7 emotions. The intelligence comes before the emotions. And that's where all the deception and the lying takes place. The animal soul's lies, it has shtick. Its reasoning is all deceptive reasoning. It's all lies. If it's Chachma and Bina, that would be the meaning of Shukar, who lives in Lebanon. Because if Lebanon is the territory of Chachma and Bina, the intellect, who creates the lies to support a godless existence? That's the mind. That's why it's the scientists today, that the intellectual elites, who they're the ones supporting the most ungodliness in the world. Because they can concoct all kinds of logic and reason to support all the madness and the craziness. The most corrupted places in the world are the colleges, where all the intellects are. Unholy intelligence. That's the Lebanon. And that's why the terrorist that was killed in Lebanon, his name is Shukar, which is Sheker. But there's another meaning to Lebanon. It comes from the word lavan, which is white, and therefore it refers to a level that's beyond colors. Because white is still the color of essence. Therefore, it refers to Keser, the crown. However, in the Sefer Pardes Rimonim from the Ramak Moshe Cordova, when he speaks about the crown, the Lebanon, the crown, he says that it's the level of the crown that drips down from the word noislim in Levanon, from where it drips from. In other words, within the crown itself, it's the level of the crown that's leaning into the lower consciousness, into the lower sephirot. So that would support the second meaning in Shukar. Shukar means shikar, drunkenness. Again, it's not the level of essence. The Qatar, Keser, is the innermost of the crown. In this case, the unholy crown. That's the identity itself of the Klippa. And that's why the leader that was living there, his name was Haniya, because the essence of the unholiness is dissuasion. It's to divert. It's to cause humanity to be diverted from God's plan, to move away, to move. But what's its actual manifestation? How does it begin to realize itself? What's its first manifestation? As we spoke earlier, it creates this unholy drives, and then it creates the lies. That's when it gets into the world of logic. And that's how it operates. That's the whole chain of command, as you say. So if we say that Lebanon is Keser, and then Shukar's name is Shikar, which means drunkardness, which represents drive that is insane. So it's either intelligence or even forces beyond intelligence, which are already effective forces in our life, in our decision-making in our life. And the actualization of decision-making, of behavior, could be driven by these drives that are, as we said before, the drive, addictive behavior and the like. Or even if we try to see ourselves as intellectuals and try to support unholy life, that's the mind, a polluted mind, a unholy mind. And that's all coming from Lebanon. But Lebanon is much closer than Qatar, which means it's closer to the actual behavioral level. It's the outer part of Keser, or it is the intellect, the Chachma and the Bina. That's Shukar, the fellow Shukar that was the part of Nasrallah's team. Then, of course, there is Gaza itself. Gaza itself, and Diefs, the guy who lives there, that was killed by Israel. So I don't have any Torah on the word Diefs. I couldn't figure that out. But it's not only Diefs, because it's all the terrorists, and there was a whole bunch of them that were now being. So basically, after October 7th, the forces of this was the last chance. After that, they are now on the run, and they're now being beaten, and they're now being destroyed because the Jewish people woke up spiritually. We did teshuvah, we did repentance. We're readying ourselves for Mashiach, and the klipa is being destroyed. And what you're watching, and this is what the whole class was meant to deliver, was that that on all tiers of on the entire force of all these levels of the unholy, they were eliminated on each level. The terrorists in Gaza, now by the way, support this, the word Gaza, which in Hebrew is called Aza. So if you look inside these two books, Ma'ore Or, I think, and Pardes Rimona, but maybe only, I think only Ma'ore Or, in this Kabbalah Sefer, he speaks about the word Az, Izim, which are goats, which are called Izim, and where he discusses that is the Za and Malchus, which are the 6 emotions, and Malchus, which is basically emotions and behavior. So as we said earlier, Gaza is the actual practical behavioral level. So the evil of the unholy behavior. The terrorists over there are obviously the monsters within the behavior. That's the sinful behavior itself. So that, as we translate that into the human experience, they were eliminated. The guy in Shukar in Lebanon, who's living a little bit on the peripheral of the land of Israel, was eliminated. Finally, Haniya himself was eliminated. And that is such amazing news. What that really means is that some core powers of darkness that are blocking humanity from being able to live the godly life we are meant to live were taken out. And what that means is that right now we are able to start living a much godlier life than we were able to live until now. Although me and you don't feel it yet, and we can kind of convince ourselves that life is going on as normal and it can just continue, but we have to know that on powerful forces that were put into place to block and to interfere with us being able to live our godly life were now removed. The grip of the snake and of the samach mem, by the way, the word Hamas is made up, as we discussed in other classes. The ches comes from the snake, and the samach mem of the word Hamas comes from the name of samach mem, which is the name of Satan. It's a combination of Satan and snake, which creates that Hamas that wants to steal the world from God, which Haniya was its leader, and this was eliminated, which means that there's nothing really there that forces us to hold on these days to our unholy consciousness. On all levels, it was broken. Now here, let me just conclude with the last thought. And the last thought is very important. And that is, how was Haniya eliminated? Haniya was eliminated when he was in Qatar. The Israelis were afraid to touch him. But he left Qatar and he went to Tehran. Why did he go to Tehran? He went to Tehran because he went for the inauguration of the president who has taken the vacant seat of Raisi, rabid anti-Semite, who was this year earlier destroyed when his helicopter went into the mountain, as we discussed earlier. So what is the deeper meaning in that? This is Gaval. This is unbelievable. We're talking about the entire forces of unholiness in this world, its manifestation in this world. The question, however, is God is the one who has to support it. Without God, nothing exists. So God had to create Satan and give him life, and the snake, and all these powers. God was the one who needed to give them initially. So Haniya, who is the essence of the Satan and the snake combined together, the essence of it, not the practical element. He's the founder of the whole situation. He's the boss. He's the big boss. That sits far away. He's at the right. But where is he getting energized? They needed to have energy from somewhere. So Kabbalah says something really interesting, and Mr. Chassidus says that if God wants holiness and goodness, why is God giving life to the unholy? So we say it's in order to create a challenge, but in Kabbalah it says an interesting thing. There is a very, very lofty level called the level of Keser, the crown. Very, very lofty level. Where God is in a very expansive place, where he's completely lost, so to speak, in his infinity. And from that place, the creation and everything in the creation is utterly meaningless. And for that place, to him, darkness and light are equal. There is no difference between darkness, which means that the merits of the world don't impress him, and the wickedness of the world doesn't anger him. He's a place beyond it all. Now, God does not want to operate from that place, because God wants to be deeply involved. So God comes down and lowers himself down to a place where he met, which the tiny world, which to God is tiny, becomes really big and significant. And from that place, he runs the world based on, and he supports the good and he eradicates the evil. But the higher level does exist. And the klipa, the unholy, loves going up to that very high place, to siphon energy from a very high place. Because they know if they can get God to operate the world from a more distant, removed place, then it's possible for the unholy to be supported. Because everything is equal. It's a very deep concept, and not for now, and I'm not going to go into it. But just know that idea. Now, that level is associated with number 11. Because there are 10 Sefirot. The 10 Sefirot are God's indwelling in the world. Number 11 is the infinite light that's beyond. That's 11. Chad v'loy b'chushban, number 11. The unholy, that's why in Kabbalah it says there are 11 crowns of unholiness. Because the unholy seeks to go up to number 11. To transcend the order of things. Now the experts who knew the secret of going up to number 11, to take energy from number 11, was none other than people who lived in Persia a long time ago, which is modern day Iran. Haman, when he wanted to destroy the Jewish people, climbed this ladder. That's why he threw lotteries. Lottery means you're not working based on reason. You're working based on chance. What that means is you're going to a place that's beyond logic. You're going to that infinite place of possibility. It's interesting that a Haman was killed together with his 10 sons. Together they're 11. Because they were seeked to tap into to number 11, to that transcendental, infinite place. We're good in. He cast lots and all of that. And, right, that was his plan of destruction. So the evil today as well plugs in to that level. And again, the supporters of Hamas, who enables them, are the Iranians. Their leader, his name was Raisi. Now, Raisi is spelled in Hebrew, Reish, Aleph, Yud, Samach, Yud. So there is a Aleph, Yud inside his name. Aleph, Yud is 11. Aleph is 1 and Yud is 11. So the essence of the word Raisi is 11. And there are 3 extra letters, Reish, Samach, Yud, which the gematria for that is 270. Reish, Samach, Yud is 270. Which 270 spells the word Ra, evil. Evil, 11. That's where evil is plugging into the divine of number 11. So this character called Raisi that happened to be alive on October 7th and was directing and influencing and giving power to Hamas to be. So the Keter of Klipa, they're down here in this world, are reliant on someone whose power, I mean, whatever it was, this Raisi's power is to reach a number 11. But you know when he was destroyed? On the 11th day, his helicopter came down on the 11th day of the month of Iyar. Iyar is the second month of the Jewish calendar, but the word Iyar also starts with an Aleph and a Yud, which is number 11, on the 11th day of the month of Iyar. And we discussed it already in a class a while ago that it's the 11th day. It's also associated with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe, which is powers of Mashiach in this world, because the Rebbe is born on the 11th day of the first month, and everything about him is number 11. We gave a whole class about 7-11. It represents the infinity. The power of holiness associated with 11 is infinite power. And then I explained how it was precisely the 11th of Iyar, which is a month after the Rebbe's birthday, which is the power where the Rebbe explains that a month after a person is born, they become very strong in this world. Till then, they're a little bit weak, but once they're 30 days old, they're considered a... So I'm not going to get into that right now. So the powers of Geula, the powers of Mashiach, broke and sent the Keser, the crown of holiness, took down the crown of impurity. On that day, the 11th day of Iyar, number 11. So once Raisi was blown apart, and it's amazing, that's why Israel did not take down Raisi, because to disconnect Raisi from that spirit, up there in heaven, only God can take him down. Like the verse says, there's a verse that says, in Tagbi Kanesher, God says to the forces of evil, if you will rise and soar like an eagle, that means you'll want to fly up. That's how Hasidus explains it. You will want to come to this very, very lofty place where you think, as a result of that, I couldn't care less about what's happening, and I might just write you a check. I might just open up the chambers of life and support evil. God says you can do that. You can get away with that for a while, but eventually I will kick you out from there. Mishama Ritcha, I will cast you down. I will throw you down. And that's what happened on the 11th day of the month of Iyar. God took the force of Klippa, Raisi, who was soaring in the heavens, speaking, and just a few weeks before that, he attacked Israel with 350 drones. And he also was responsible for October 7th. God himself took him down, because in heaven, that battle is for God to do. But once God took him down, what happened? Oh my, spiritually, Haniya, living in Qatar, doesn't have any more power coming through his outlet. He needs to charge his phone. He needs to charge himself, and there's no power because his connection is broken. So he traveled now to Iran for the inauguration of the new president, hoping that the new president will plug him in again. But God pulled the plug already. And that's why, as he was sitting in the headquarters in Tehran, in the place where thousands of years ago, close to 2,500 years ago, the story of Purim happened. And God turned the tables on Haman. So God turned the tables on Haniya. And while he was there on his bed, a bomb exploded. Now, there was many stories about how Haniya was killed, but the most recent version is as follows. People said, the New York Times said a story that they planted the bomb 2 months earlier, but according to what I the newest version is 9 hours or 6-7 hours before, somehow the Mossad paid off some of the guards of that were in that building and got them to plant the bomb and whisked them out, and must have paid them a ton of money and whisked them out. They sold out their own guy. Why? Because Klippa doesn't have any true allegiance. There's nothing real over there. There's no real devotion. There's no real commitment. You can buy anybody out. So they gave them the money. They planted the bomb. But just interesting, the way he was killed was a bomb exploded under his bed. What that really means is that the essence of the unholy, if we dig deep into ourselves and we get to our essence of the purity of our egos, it will implode upon us. There's no real, as we said, there's nothing real there. The essence of our soul is enduring, lasting, permanent, because it's God, and God is truth. So the fact that it blew up from underneath him, like it just blew up and under his bed, meaning it will, in other words, when we think we will live a life following our own egos, and at a certain point it implodes upon us. It just blows up on our face. It doesn't last. There's nothing really to it. So you see the entire chain of command of impurity was taken down. Raisi first, he's disconnected up there. Once they're disconnected, they will all fall on all levels. Haniya is the essence, down. Once the Shukar, which is doesn't have any steam. Once the essence is gone, then the lies and the lies, the deception and the drive, it can't keep up. It doesn't have life. It's like an engine that can continue working a little bit on charged battery, but eventually it's going to die itself out. And he was taken out. It's interesting. We said Lebanon. Lebanon is, we said from the word Levanon. It's interesting. Lavan, who is Jacob's uncle Lavan, what is he known for? To be a liar. He was the ultimate deceptive, because that's that level. Lebanon is the level of deception and lies, Shukar, and drunkenness, as we spoke of, intoxication. He's out. And then finally, in the territories itself, the mastermind, the evil. There's still one guy there, Yahya Sinwar. They're going to take care of him soon as well. But they're done. They're finished. On all these levels, the Klippa were taken out. Now, the lower levels are taken out directly. Israel takes credit for it. Because on the lower levels, we can fight those battles. On the levels of essence, like Haniya, we can't just decide my essence is a holy essence. We can't. You can't unseat the ego on that very deep level. It's there. That's why we said only very few people accomplish that. So that's why Israel, but it does say that through the revelation of the holy essence, the essence of the impure you don't have to fight it. It just dissipates on its own. It could be because the essence of the Jewish people woke up in the land of Israel. Jews across the entire world who so disconnected from their Judaism over the last year feel so Jewish and feel so strongly a part of the Jewish nation and care about Jewish things so much more than ever before. That's the awakening of essence. And it was, instead of seeing their identity as American, as this, they feeling deeply Jewish. That's the awakening of the Jewish essence. And that's what causes the impure essence to just implode and to go. So, but it's not a direct battle. It's an indirect thing. And for that reason, Israel did not openly take credit for that, but we all know that it comes from our work. But Raisi, that is a mystery. Conspiracy theorists say, yes, the Mossad must have had a hand in it. We know God took him out, and that's okay as well. But the entire apparatus of the unholy has come down. What does that mean practically to us? It means we are ready now to open up the door for Mashiach and to radically become different people, to start living godly life completely. We don't have to remain loyal to lies of yesterday, to distortions of yesterday. They don't exist anymore on a real level. Now, any moment when Mashiach walks through the door, which is going to happen very soon, all this is going to become automatically felt by all of us. Until that happens, we have the choice to make it our reality, although we don't, before it becomes so naturally, we have the choice to choose that, and that is very special. So now we can start living really on a truly godly level. May Hashem help us all to merit to see Mashiach, to be able to drop that falsehood that we've been living with, to know that they've been crushed already, it's gone, and time to start living. Thank you.